The night air in Fallujah carried the metallic tang of spent ammunition. Flashes of gunfire lit up the horizon like distant lightning, casting harsh shadows across the ruined cityscape. Inside a half-collapsed apartment building, 6 American soldiers pressed themselves against bullet-pocked walls, their ammunition nearly depleted, communications jammed. Captain David Parker wiped blood from his brow and checked his magazine, 3 rounds left. The rest of his team wasn't faring much better. Hostiles had them surrounded on 3 sides, at least 20 fighters with seemingly endless supplies. Command's not responding. Staff Sergeant Miller whispered, desperation edging into his voice. Extraction's a no-go. We're on our own. Parker nodded grimly. After 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, he recognized the weight of imminent death settling across his shoulders. He'd felt it before, but never quite this heavy. "We make our stand here," he said, his voice steady despite the certainty burning in his gut. "Conserve ammo. Make every shot count." The insurgents were closing in their voices, carrying through the shattered windows. Arabic commands confident and unhurried. They knew they had the Americans trapped. A sudden silence fell outside, unsettling in its completeness. Then came a sound that chilled Parker's blood, a soft thud from the floor above them. Someone had entered the building from the roof. The team raised their weapons toward the ceiling, fingers hovering over triggers. The power cut out entirely, plunging the building into absolute darkness. What followed would haunt Parker's dreams for years to come. A whisper of movement, a series of muffled impacts, the unmistakable sound of bodies falling. No gunshots, just the quiet efficiency of death moving through the night. Outside, confused shouts erupted from the insurgents, followed by sporadic gunfire aimed wildly at shadows. One by one, the voices fell silent, replaced by a heavy, expectant hush. 12 seconds. That's all it took. Parker activated his night vision, scanning the street below through a shattered window. Bodies lay scattered across the pavement, their positions suggesting they never saw what hit them. 12 men down in the 12 seconds. "What the hell?" Miller breathed beside him. A figure materialized in the doorway of their room, a silhouette darker than the surrounding darkness. The team swung their weapons toward the intruder, but Parker raised his fist, signaling them to hold fire. The figure stepped forward, revealing a lean frame dressed in unmarked tactical gear. The face remained obscured by a mask and night vision equipment, but something about the way the person moved, fluid, economical, precisely balanced, told Parker this was no ordinary operator. "You're clear for 2 miles east," the figure said, voice deliberately modulated to conceal gender and identity. "Extraction point relocated to the old marketplace. 20 minutes. Parker struggled to find his voice. "Who are you? What unit?" The figure turned slightly, and in the green glow of night vision, Parker caught a glimpse of something on the back of the stranger's neck. The edge of a tattoo, an eagle's talon wrapped around what looked like a human skull. "I don't exist," came the reply. "Neither does this conversation." With that, the figure melted back into the darkness, leaving behind nothing but dead insurgents and questions that would never find answers in any official report. 20 minutes later, as promised, a helicopter touched down in the abandoned marketplace, evacuating Parker's team without incident. When debriefed about how they escaped the ambush, Parker simply reported, "We got lucky, found an opening and took it. Some truths were better left unspoken, some saviors better left acknowledged only in silence." Fort Harrison, Virginia, 2023. The morning sun glinted off the polished metal gates of Fort Harrison, casting long shadows across the entry checkpoint. Robert Thompson, a stocky sergeant with 17 years of service behind him, squinted at the approaching vehicle, a battered Ford F-150 that had seen better decades. Its once blue paint had faded to a patchy, grayish-blue rust, claiming victory along the wheel wells. Thompson sighed, already annoyed. The modern military ran on precision and punctuality. This vehicle, trailing a cloud of dust as it rumbled toward the gate, was already an hour late for the Euro 700 check-in time for new arrivals. The truck ground to a halt, and Thompson approached with practiced authority, clipboard in hand. The driver's side window rolled down with a protesting squeak, revealing a woman who looked nothing like what Thompson expected to see at Fort Harrison's elite combat training program. She was small, maybe 5'4", in boots, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Her face bore no makeup, just a light scatter of freckles across high cheekbones and a small scar bisecting her right eyebrow. Nothing remarkable about her features, nothing that would make her stand out in a crowd. She wore a faded olive t-shirt that had been washed too many times, and her eyes, a deep, observant gray, met his without flinching. "You're lost," Thompson stated rather than asked, not bothering to hide his contempt. "Kitchen staff entrance is on the south side of the base." The woman didn't react to the insult. She simply handed over a set of orders and an ID card. "Emily Winters reporting for the ECTP training cycle," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Thompson scanned the paperwork, his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline as he read. The orders were legitimate, signed by Colonel Richard Davis himself. This woman, this unremarkable, diminutive woman, was assigned to the most elite combat training program the military had to offer. "There must be some mistake," he muttered, flipping the page over as if expecting to find a correction on the back. "No mistake, Sergeant," she replied with the same quiet confidence. "My orders were confirmed last week." Thompson reluctantly handed back her documents. "Pull through to Lot C, report to Building 17 for processing. You're already late." He added the last part with undisguised satisfaction. Emily nodded, accepting the base map he thrust at her. As she rolled up her window, Thompson couldn't resist a parting shot. "Hope you brought tissues. The washout rate for men is 70%. For women?" He let the implication hang in the air. Emily drove through without responding, but in her rearview mirror she caught Thompson shaking his head and smirking as he radioed ahead. No doubt spreading this word about the program's newest, and in his mind soon-to-be briefest, participant. The sprawling grounds of Fort Harrison unfolded before her. Established in 1907 as a response to evolving warfare tactics after Vietnam, the base had become the crown jewel of advanced combat training. Its weathered buildings housed decades of military history. Its training grounds had forged some of the most lethal operators in American military history, and every inch of it was designed to break those who didn't belong. Emily parked her truck in Lot C, positioning it between gleaming SUVs and spotless sedans. Her vehicle stood out like a sore thumb, exactly as intended. She grabbed her worn duffel bag from the passenger seat and took a moment to survey her surroundings, mentally mapping the layout against the satellite imagery she'd memorized weeks ago. Building 17 loomed ahead, a three-story concrete structure with windows like judging eyes. Outside its entrance, a group of men in physical training uniforms clustered together, their conversation dying as Emily approached. She counted 12 of them, all tall, all fit, wearing expressions ranging from curiosity to outright derision. At the center stood a man who needed no introduction. Ryan Wilson, 6'2", son of General Thomas Wilson, third-generation military and the golden boy of this training cycle. His personnel file described him as exceptionally gifted in combat tactics and natural leadership material. His file didn't mention the sense of entitlement that radiated from him like heat from asphalt. Emily walked past the group, eyes forward, pace unhurried. "Hey," Ryan called out, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. "Kitchen's that way, sweetheart." Laughter rippled through the group. Emily continued walking without breaking stride. "I think she's lost," another voice chimed in. "Should we help her find the administrative building? They're probably looking for a new secretary." More laughter, louder this time. Emily reached for the door handle. "Or maybe she's the new diversity initiative we've been hearing about," Ryan suggested, making air quotes with his fingers. "Pentagon's really scraping the bottom of the barrel these days." Emily paused, her hand on the door. She turned slightly, not enough to face them, just enough to show she'd heard. Her silence seemed to unnerve them more than any comeback could have. Inside Building 17, the processing station was staffed by a harried-looking corporal who barely glanced up as Emily approached. "Name?" he asked, fingers hovering over his keyboard. "Winters Emily, 2nd Lieutenant." That made him look up, surprise flickering across his features before he masked it with military professionalism. "You're late, Lieutenant." "Vehicle trouble," she replied simply. "Serpentine belt snapped about 10 miles out." "And you didn't call for assistance?" "Didn't need it. I replaced it myself." The corporal eyed her skeptically, taking in her clean hands and unmarked uniform. Emily didn't elaborate. Let him wonder. He processed her paperwork, assigned her a barracks room, and handed over a schedule so densely packed with training evolutions that it bordered on inhumane. "First assembly is in 20 minutes. Briefing room A. Don't be late for that too," he added with a hint of condescension. Emily nodded and left her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. She had 19 minutes to stow her gear and change into proper uniform. More than enough time to also plant the first of several surveillance devices she'd brought with her. Briefing room hummed with tense energy as 42 candidates, 41 men, and Emily awaited the arrival of the command staff. Conversations flowed around her like water around a stone, none of it directed at her, all of it occasionally about her. So her chief fixed her own truck, probably lying looking for sympathy. Quota requirement has to be. Emily sat perfectly still in the back row, her posture regulation perfect, her face a mask of polite attention. She'd chosen her seat strategically back to the wall, clear sight lines to all exits, optimal position to observe every other person in the room without being obvious about it. The door opened sharply at exactly 0830, and conversation died instantly as Lieutenant Colonel James Carter strode in. At 45, Carter carried himself with the coiled intensity of a man half his age. His face bore the weathered lines of extensive field experience, his eyes missing nothing as they swept across the assembled candidates. Behind him followed the training cadre, 4 sergeants who would serve as the primary instructors, each specializing in different aspects of combat operations. Leading them was Master Sergeant Kevin Young, a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair and a reputation for breaking even the most confident recruits. Carter didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Look to your left," he commanded, his voice filling the room without seeming to rise above conversational volume. "Now look to your right." The candidates complied, some exchanging nervous glances. By the end of this 16-week program, at least one of those people will be gone. Statistically speaking, both of them will be gone, and quite possibly, so will you. He paced slowly across the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back. The elite combat training program isn't about making you stronger or faster, though that will happen. It's about finding those among you who already possess what cannot be taught, the instinct, the will, and the capacity to do what must be done when all options are bad ones. His gaze settled momentarily on Emily's expression, unreadable, before moving on. "You're here because someone somewhere believed you might have those qualities. My job is to determine if they were right or if they wasted my time." He gestured to Master Sergeant Young, who stepped forward with a tablet. "Today begins with evaluations, physical fitness tests, weapons proficiency, tactical problem solving. Consider it your baseline. You'll be assigned to squads based on these results." Young began reading off names, organizing the candidates into groups of 4. When he reached the end of his list, Emily remained unassigned. "Winters." Young called out, his tone making her name sound like an accusation. "You'll complete evaluations with Squad 5. Squad 5 consisted of Ryan Wilson, a muscular former college football player named Jason Richards, and a quiet, intense man in his mid-30s who Emily immediately recognized as Matthew Jenkins, former Army Ranger, with 3 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star from operations in Iraq. Ryan's smirk told her everything she needed to know about this assignment. She'd been placed with the strongest candidates, a setup designed to highlight any weaknesses or limitations. It was exactly the kind of predictable psychological tactic she'd expected. "Squads 1 through 3 report to the obstacle course," Young barked. "Squads 4 through 7 report to the firing range. Move out." The room emptied quickly, candidates filing out with purposeful efficiency. As Emily rose to follow her assigned squad, Colonel Carter's voice stopped her. "Lieutenant Winters?" She turned, facing him with appropriate military courtesy. "Sir." Carter studied her for a long moment, his expression giving nothing away. "Your file is interesting. Distinguished service record, excellent technical scores, yet no combat deployments on record. Care to explain how you qualified for this program?" It was a test, of course. Her cover story had been meticulously crafted to withstand scrutiny, but the real challenge was delivering it convincingly. "I served in a support capacity for multiple joint operations, sir," she replied, her tone respectful but not deferential. "My technical contributions were deemed valuable enough to merit consideration for field operations." "Technical contributions," he repeated, rolling the phrase around like he was tasting something suspicious. "This isn't a tech program, Lieutenant. This is about performance under extreme duress." "Yes, sir, I understand." Carter's eyes narrowed slightly. We've had 2 women attempt this course before. Both were exceptional officers. Both failed within the first week. Emily met his gaze steadily. "I'm not them, sir." Something flickered in Carter's expression, not quite approval, perhaps curiosity. He nodded once. "No, I suppose you're not." "Dismiss, Lieutenant." Emily turned and left, feeling Carter's evaluating gaze on her back all the way to the door. The first test had been passed, but it was merely a prelude to what would come. The firing range echoed with the rhythmic crack of semi-automatic fire. Candidates took turns at the line, demonstrating proficiency with the standard-issue M4 carbine at various distances. Master Sergeant Young stalked behind them, barking corrections and occasionally nodding with grudging approval. Emily waited her turn, observing her squad mate's performance with quiet attention. Ryan Wilson shot with the confidence of someone who'd grown up around firearms, his groupings tight and centered. Jason Richards was slightly less precise, but compensated with speed. Matthew Jenkins, however, moved with the measured economy of a combat veteran, his shots finding their marks with methodical consistency. "Winters," Young called. "You're up." Emily stepped to the line, accepting the rifle from Jenkins with a nod of thanks. She felt the weight of everyone's attention, some curious, others already dismissive. "Standard qualification course," Young instructed. 20 rounds, 4 magazines, targets at increasing distances. Begin when ready. Emily lifted the rifle, settling it against her shoulder with practiced ease. She sighted down the range, controlled her breathing, and began to fire. Her first 5 shots formed a tight cluster at the center of the target. Nothing exceptional, nothing that would draw undue attention. Just solid marksmanship. She reloaded smoothly and continued maintaining the same level of proficiency throughout the course. Not the best on the range, but comfortably above average. Exactly where she needed to be. Young grunted as he assessed her target. "Acceptable, Winters. Step back." As Emily moved away from the firing line, she caught Ryan watching her, his expression calculating. He'd expected her to fail spectacularly, and when she hadn't, his contempt had evolved into something more dangerous: suspicion. "Surprised?" she asked quietly as she passed him. "Lucky grouping," he replied with a shrug. "Let's see how you handle the next phase." The next phase proved to be a weapon disassembly and reassembly drill, a test of technical knowledge and muscle memory that separated those who merely shot guns from those who understood them. Master Sergeant Young demonstrated the procedure once on an M4 carbine, his hands moving with practiced precision as he broke down the weapon into its component parts and reassembled it in just under 2 minutes. "Your target time is 3 minutes, he announced. "Failure to properly reassemble or function check your weapon will result in automatic disqualification from this exercise." The candidates were divided into groups of 4, each provided with a weapon and a timer. Emily found herself grouped with Ryan Jason and a nervous-looking lieutenant named David Chen. Ryan went first, his movements confident and rehearsed. He completed the task in 1 minute and 35 seconds, an impressive time that earned a nod of approval from Young. "Not bad, Wilson," the sergeant acknowledged. "Richards, you're up." Jason managed a respectable 2 minutes and 12 seconds, while Chen struggled with the recoil spring assembly, finishing just under the wire at 2 minutes and 56 seconds. "Winters," Young called, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Let's see what you've got." Emily stepped forward, aware of the eyes tracking her every move. Ryan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Several other candidates had paused their own drills to watch, expecting entertainment at her expense. She positioned herself at the table, hands relaxed at her sides, and waited for Young's signal. "Begin." Emily's hands moved with fluid precision, breaking down the rifle with practiced economy. No wasted motion, no hesitation between steps. Her fingers seemed to anticipate each pin and spring, each component separating and arranging itself in a perfect grid on the table before her. The room grew quieter as she worked, the expected fumbling and uncertainty replaced by a display of expertise that bordered on artistry. She reassembled the weapon with the same methodical efficiency, each piece finding its home with satisfying clicks and slides. She performed the function check, then set the rifle down and stepped back, her expression neutral. Young stared at the stopwatch in his hand, then at Emily, then back at the watch. 42 seconds, he announced, disbelief evident in his voice. A murmur rippled through the room. The previous record at Fort Harrison had stood at 1 minute and 8 seconds, set by a veteran armorer with 15 years of experience. "That's impossible," Ryan said, pushing away from the wall. "She must have skipped steps." Young picked up the rifle, examining it with critical eyes, cycling the action and checking the function. After a thorough inspection, he looked at Emily with narrowed eyes. "Where did you learn to do that, Lieutenant?" All eyes turned to her, waiting for an explanation that could make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Emily met Young's gaze steadily. "Practice, Sergeant," she replied simply. Young's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "Effective practice, apparently." He addressed the room at large. "Continue with your drills. This isn't a spectator sport." Upon as the activities resumed around them, Ryan stepped closer to Emily, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "There's no way a support officer learns to do that without specialized training. Who are you really, Winters?" Emily regarded him with the same neutral expression she'd maintained throughout the day. "Just someone who takes their training seriously, Wilson." His eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that tomorrow during hand-to-hand combat training. Can't wait to see these amazing reflexes of yours in action." He walked away back straight with wounded pride. Emily watched him go, noting the way he immediately huddled with Jason, both of them glancing back at her with poorly concealed hostility. Only Matthew Jenkins remained nearby, methodically cleaning his disassembled weapon. He didn't look up as he spoke. "That was quite a performance," he said quietly. "Not many people can surprise Young." Emily began cleaning her own weapon. Wasn't trying to surprise anyone. Jenkins assembled his rifle with smooth, efficient movements, not as fast as Emily, but with the same evidence of countless repetitions behind each motion. "Piece of advice," he offered, still not looking directly at her. "In a place like this, it's sometimes better to be good enough, not exceptional. Exceptional gets noticed. Exceptional gets scrutinized." He finished with a weapon and stood to leave, finally meeting her eyes. There was something in his gaze, not suspicion, exactly more like recognition. "But I guess you already knew that," he added before walking away, leaving Emily to consider the implication of his words. By late afternoon, as Emily made her way to the women's barracks, a small annex separated from the main housing area, she'd cataloged 15 different conversations about her, ranging from grudging admiration to outright resentment. The weapon disassembly had changed her status from diversity hire to person of interest, neither of which served her purpose. The women's barracks was designed to accommodate up to 12 female trainees, but Emily found herself alone in the Spartan facility. Her footsteps echoed off bare walls as she made her way to the furthest bunk from the entrance, the least desirable spot furthest from the heating vents and closest to the always dripping shower. She stowed her gear in the assigned locker, carefully positioning her few personal items where they could be easily observed by anyone snooping through her belongings. The well-worn paperback novels, the generic toiletries, the standard-issue training gear, all carefully selected to reveal nothing of consequence. The bathroom was empty, the evening light casting long shadows across the tiled floor. Emily checked carefully for surveillance devices, finding none before locking herself in the furthest shower stall. Only then did she allow herself a moment of true privacy, removing the thin chain from around her neck and examining the small pendant that hung from it. Not a pendant at all, but a high-security data storage device disguised as an unremarkable piece of jewelry. She twisted it open, revealing a miniature USB connector, which she plugged into an equally small receiver extracted from the heel of her boot. Text scrolled across the tiny display. "Secured connection, established mission. Blackbird status, update required." Emily tapped a brief response fingers, moving with practiced efficiency. "Insertion complete cover. Intact surveillance initiated target assessment ongoing." The reply came seconds later. "Proceed with phase 2. Next check-in, 0200 Shepard sends regards." Emily's expression softened momentarily at the last line, the closest thing to personal communications she could expect. She cleared the device, reassembled it, and returned it to its place around her neck, tucked safely beneath her shirt. The woman who emerged from the bathroom minutes later was outwardly identical to the one who had entered her face, revealing nothing of the complex operations she was orchestrating beneath her unremarkable exterior. Darkness had fallen over Fort Harrison when Emily slipped out of the barracks, moving with the confident stride of someone with legitimate business. In a military installation, walking with purpose was often the only authorization needed to avoid unwanted attention. She made her way to the southeastern perimeter, where the base's older infrastructure offered less comprehensive surveillance coverage. A maintenance access point in the fence, officially secured but practically overlooked due to budget constraints, provided her with a 5-minute window between security patrols. The woods beyond the perimeter were thick with summer foliage, concealing her movements as she navigated by memory rather than light. 300 meters in a small clearing opened up, barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the canopy. A figure waited there, seated on a fallen log face obscured by shadow. Emily approached without hesitation, recognizing the outline of the man she'd known since childhood. "You're late, Colonel Thomas Shepard," Harrison said, his gravelly voice pitched low, despite their isolation. "Security patterns have changed since your intel," Emily replied, taking a seat beside him. "Eastern Sector has doubled its patrol frequency." Harrison nodded, absorbing this information. At 60, his face bore the weathered lines of decades in the field, his once dark hair now steel gray. Nothing about his appearance suggested retirement, however. His posture remained military straight, his eyes alert and assessing. "You made quite an impression today," he noted with a hint of disapproval. 42 seconds. Emily allowed herself a small smile in the darkness. "Had to establish baseline capabilities. Next time I'll aim for mediocrity." "See that you do." Harrison's tone softened slightly. "Your cover needs to hold for at least 8 more weeks. The longer you remain unremarkable, the better." Ryan Wilson's already suspicious. Expected. His father didn't raise a fool. Harrison shifted, removing a small device from his pocket. "Speaking of the Wilsons, we've intercepted concerning communications." The device projected a holographic display between them, showing intercepted message fragments and surveillance photos. General Thomas Wilson featured prominently, as did his son Ryan. "The weapons technology scheduled for demonstration next month has drawn attention from several hostile actors," Harrison explained. "Our intelligence suggests someone at Fort Harrison is providing insider information to a group calling themselves Black Crescent." Emily studied the projection. "And you suspect the Wilsons?" "We suspect everyone with access to the relevant information. General Wilson's position makes him a high-value target for blackmail or coercion. Ryan's presence at Fort Harrison provides a convenient back channel if needed." Harrison deactivated the device, plunging them back into darkness. "Your mission remains unchanged. Identify the leak, gather evidence, report back. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." Emily nodded. "And if Ryan Wilson is clean, then find who isn't." Harrison stood, signaling the end of their meeting. "Watch for a woman named Megan Collins. She arrives tomorrow, late transferred to the program. Her background checks out too perfectly." "Understood." Harrison paused, studying her with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. "Be careful, Emily. Ghost talent operatives aren't supposed to exist, which means if you are compromised—" "I know," she replied simply. "No extraction plan." For a moment, the hardened exterior of her mentor cracked, revealing the man who had found her 15 years ago, a broken, angry teenager with too much talent and too little direction. The man who had given her purpose training and the closest thing to family she'd known since losing her parents. "I didn't send you in there to D," he said quietly. "Then I won't," Emily promised, her voice softening briefly. "How's the shoulder?" Harrison rotated his left arm unconsciously. "Getting there. Another month of physical therapy, and I'll be back to beating you at the firing range." "In your dreams, old man?" The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Get back before you're missed. Next contact in 3 days, same protocol." Emily nodded and melted back into the darkness, retracing her path to the base with the same careful precision. As she approached the perimeter, a flicker of movement caught her attention. Someone else moving through the shadows near the fence line. She froze, becoming one with the darkness, as she observed the figure, female, athletic build, moving with purpose rather than stealth. Not security personnel based on the civilian clothing. The woman checked her watch, then scanned the area before slipping through the same maintenance access point Emily had used earlier. Inside the perimeter, the woman's face became visible in the ambient light of the base, striking features framed by blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail. She wore fitness clothing that emphasized her athletic figure and carried herself with confidence that bordered on arrogance. Emily committed the face to memory. This had to be Megan Collins, arriving early and unannounced, accessing the base through unofficial channels. Question was why? Rather than following immediately, Emily waited, counting off minutes in her head. Then she took a different route back to the barracks, careful to avoid security cameras and patrols. The information would be valuable to Harrison, but pursuing it now risked exposing her own unauthorized absence. Back in her bunk, Emily lay awake, her mind cataloging the day's observations and planning contingencies. Sleep, when it finally came, was light and vigilant, the sleep of someone who knew that safety was always an illusion, especially for ghosts who walked among the living. Dawn broke over Fort Harrison with military precision, the bugle call of reveille piercing the early morning stillness. Emily was already awake, completing her 50 push-ups, a personal ritual that predated even her ghost talent training. The door to the barracks swung open as she finished, revealing a woman Emily recognized immediately, the blonde figure from the previous night. Up close, Megan Collins was even more striking, flawless complexion, perfectly proportioned features, and a physique that spoke of dedicated training. "Oh," Megan said, feigning surprise. "I didn't realize anyone was already here." Her voice carried the polished cadence of expensive education, each word precisely enunciated. Emily stood wiping her palms on her PT shorts. "Lieutenant Emily Winters," she offered with professional courtesy. Megan's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Lieutenant Megan Collins, I'm a late addition to the program." She glanced around the empty barracks. "Looks like it's just us girls, huh?" "Looks that way." Megan set her bags on the bunk nearest the door, the prime location with the best access to heating and facilities. She began unpacking with efficient movements her designer athletic wear, a stark contrast to Emily's standard issue gear. "I heard about your performance yesterday," Megan said casually. 42 seconds on weapon disassembly, pretty impressive for someone without combat experience." The statement was carefully crafted, part compliment, part interrogation. Emily recognized the technique. She'd used it herself countless times. "I spend a lot of time with weapons systems," Emily replied with deliberate vagueness. "Technical familiarity transfers." Megan nodded, unconvinced. "Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what else you can do. It's nice having another woman here. We should stick together." The words sounded friendly enough, but Emily detected the underlying calculation. Megan was establishing a connection that could be leveraged, later positioning herself as an ally while gathering information. "Today's hand-to-hand combat, right?" Megan continued, pulling out a set of perfectly pressed PT uniforms. "Should be interesting." "Should be," Emily agreed noncommittally. As they prepared for the day's training, Emily maintained casual observation of her new roommate. Megan moved with the fluid grace of someone with extensive physical training, possibly dance or martial arts. Her personal items, high-end toiletries, custom athletic gear, a surprisingly expensive watch suggested significant financial resources beyond a lieutenant's salary. Most tellingly, despite claiming to be a late addition, Megan seemed completely familiar with the base layout, navigating to the dining facility without hesitation or reference to any map. They entered the facility together, drawing immediate attention from the male trainees already seated at long tables. Ryan Wilson's group occupied the center table, prime territory in the unofficial hierarchy that had already established itself. "Well, hello there," Ryan called out, his eyes fixed on Megan with undisguised appreciation. "Looks like the program just got more interesting." Megan offered a dazzling smile. "Lieutenant Megan Collins, just transferred in from Fort Benning." "Ryan Wilson," he replied, standing to pull out a chair beside him. "Why don't you join us? We can fill you in on what you've missed." Megan accepted the invitation with practiced charm, seamlessly integrating herself into the group, while Emily proceeded alone to the serving line. As she collected her breakfast, plain oatmeal, fruit, black coffee, Emily positioned herself at a corner table with good sight lines to both exits and Ryan's group. She wasn't surprised when a tray settled across from her moments later. Matthew Jenkins nodded a greeting as he took a seat, his own breakfast similarly utilitarian. "Mind the company?" he asked, though he was already seated. Emily shrugged. "Free country." They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes, two people accustomed to their own thoughts. Jenkins broke the quiet first. "Your new roommate's making friends fast," he observed, nodding toward Ryan's table where Megan had the entire group captivated with some story. "She's good with people," Emily replied neutrally. Jenkins studied her for a moment. "You're not what you seem, Winters." Emily met his gaze steadily. "Few people are." "True enough." He took a sip of coffee. "Iraq taught me that. 3 tours, special operations. You learn to spot the difference between what people say they are and what they actually are." It wasn't a question, but the implication hung in the air between them. Emily neither confirmed nor denied his unstated suspicion. "Sometimes appearances are misleading," she allowed. "Sometimes they're not." Jenkins nodded slowly, accepting the non-answer. Hand-to-hand starts in 30. Wilson's gunning for you, you know. After yesterday, he needs to reassert dominance. Let him try. A ghost of a smile touched Jenkins' weathered face. That's what I thought you'd say. He stood collecting his tray. Word of advice, don't show all your cards at once. This game's just getting started. He left without waiting for a response, leaving Emily to consider his words as she finished her breakfast. Across the room, she caught Megan watching her with calculated interest before turning back to her rapt audience. Two players recognizing each other across a crowded board. The question was, what game was Megan Collins really playing? The combat training facility smelled of sweat and determination, its padded floors bearing witness to countless struggles where future operators had proven their worth or found their limits. Master Sergeant Young stood at the center of the room, his muscular frame a testament to decades of physical discipline. Combat effectiveness isn't about size or strength, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the facility. It's about leveraging what you have against what your opponent doesn't expect. The trainees formed a circle around the demonstration area, their expressions ranging from eager to apprehensive. Emily positioned herself between Jenkins and a quiet lieutenant named Rodriguez, keeping both Ryan and Megan in her peripheral vision. Today, we assess your hand-to-hand capabilities, Young continued. Basic grappling strikes and defensive maneuvers. This isn't a competition. His eyes swept the circle, lingering briefly on Ryan, but it is an evaluation. Your performance here will factor into your overall standing. He gestured to the assistant instructors positioned around the room. Break into your assigned pairs. Begin with standard warm-up sequences, then proceed to basic takedown techniques. The group dispersed, moving to designated areas with their partners. Emily found herself paired with a nervous-looking lieutenant named Park, who approached their assignment with obvious reluctance. I haven't had much hand-to-hand training, he admitted as they faced each other on the mat. That's what we're here for, Emily assured him, deliberately softening her voice. Let's start slow. They worked through the basic sequences, block strikes, simple takedowns, with Emily carefully moderating her responses to match Park's limited skill level. She corrected his form with patient guidance, demonstrating proper technique without overwhelming him. Across the room, she noted Ryan working with Megan, their interaction, a stark contrast to her own pairing. Ryan moved with aggressive confidence, clearly showing off, while Megan responded with surprising skill, matching him technique for technique. As the session progressed, Young called for rotation of partners. Emily found herself working with the increasingly skilled opponents, adjusting her performance to remain competent but unremarkable. She won some exchanges, lost others, maintaining the profile of a solid but not exceptional fighter. Jenkins, paired with her during the third rotation, recognized her strategy immediately. Pulling your punches. Winters, he murmured as they circled each other. Just focusing on technique, she replied, executing a textbook shoulder throw that he countered with practiced ease. Uh-huh. His eyes held knowing amusement. Your technique changes with every partner. Interesting approach. Before she could respond, Young's voice cut through the general noise of the training floor. Wilson Winters center mat. Emily turned to find Ryan already striding toward the main demonstration area, a predatory smile playing at his lips. This was the confrontation he'd been waiting for, a chance to reassert his dominance after yesterday's unexpected challenge to his status. Good luck, Jenkins murmured as she moved to comply with the order. Young stood at the edge of the mat, arms crossed over his broad chest. Standard rules. Technical demonstration, only no full contact strikes. Clear, Ryan nodded, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. Crystal clear, Sergeant. Emily took her position opposite him, her stance balanced and neutral, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Begin, Young commanded, stepping back to observe. Ryan didn't waste time, advancing immediately with confident steps. He had at least 60 pounds and 8 inches on her advantages he clearly intended to press. His first move was a probing jab, testing her defenses. Emily slipped the punch easily, moving just enough to avoid contact without counterattacking. Ryan followed with a combination jab cross attempted grapple that would have overwhelmed a less experienced opponent. She blocked, deflected, and sidestepped, her movements economical and precise, not showing extraordinary skill, just solid defensive technique. Come on, Winters, Ryan taunted, circling her with predatory focus. Show me what you've got. Or is weapon disassembly the only thing you can do? Emily maintained her guard, allowing him to believe his aggression was forcing her into a purely defensive posture. Around them, the other trainees had stopped their own practice to watch, forming a ring of attentive faces. Ryan pressed his attack, growing more aggressive as Emily continued to evade without countering. His confidence swelled visibly with each exchange, his smile widening as he backed her toward the edge of the mat. Winters, Young called out, "This is a demonstration of skill, not avoidance. Engage." It was the opening Ryan had been waiting for. As Emily shifted her stance to comply with the order, he lunged forward with a powerful takedown attempt, hands grasping for her shoulders. Emily allowed the contact but controlled her fall, rolling with his momentum and using his forward drive against him. They hit the mat together, Ryan immediately attempting to establish dominant position. For several seconds they grappled in close quarters, a tangle of limbs and technical counters. To observers, it appeared evenly matched, a larger, stronger opponent against a smaller, quicker one. Then Ryan made his move, attempting a submission hold that involved grasping the collar of Emily's training uniform. The fabric bunched in his grip, and as she rotated to counter it, tore partially along the seam. "Watch the uniform, Wilson," Young barked from the sidelines. Ryan's focus shifted momentarily to the instructor, and Emily used the split-second distraction to execute a textbook escape, creating space between them. As they reset, Ryan's expression had hardened from confidence to frustration. "Stop dancing and fight," he growled low enough that only she could hear. Emily met his gaze steadily. "If you insist." The shift in her demeanor was subtle but immediate, a slight adjustment in her stance, a new focus in her eyes. When Ryan charged again, her response was different. She moved into his attack rather than away from it, her hands finding leverage points on his larger frame with precision born of thousands of repetitions. Before he could process what was happening, his momentum was redirected, his balance compromised. Ryan Wilson, star trainee and son of a general, found himself airborne for a fraction of a second before his back slammed into the mat with controlled but decisive force. The room went silent. Emily stepped back immediately, her expression neutral, as Ryan stared up at her in stunned disbelief. The torn collar of her uniform had slipped further, revealing the edge of something dark against her skin, the beginning of what appeared to be a tattoo at the base of her neck. She adjusted the fabric quickly, but not before several people noticed, including Young, whose eyes narrowed with sudden interest. "Effective counter, Winters." He acknowledged, his tone carefully professional. Wilson, reset and try again with better control. Ryan got to his feet, the flush of embarrassment coloring his face as he resumed his stance. The look he gave Emily promised retribution beyond the confines of this training session. Their second exchange was more cautious on Ryan's part, his earlier confidence replaced by wary respect. Emily maintained her performance at the same level, competent but not extraordinary, allowing him to score points while preventing any decisive victory. When Young finally called time, both were breathing hard, though Emily's control remained notably stronger than Ryan's. "Adequate demonstration from both of you," Young concluded, though his gaze lingered on Emily with new consideration. All trainees resumed regular partner work. As they left the center mat, Ryan stepped close to Emily, his voice pitched low with barely contained anger. "Lucky move, Winters. Don't get used to it." Emily met his gaze calmly. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Wilson. You telegraphed your intention 3 seconds before you moved." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him staring after her with a mixture of rage and confusion. Across the room, Megan Collins watched the entire exchange with calculating eyes. Her attention particularly focused on the spot where Emily's uniform had torn. After class, as trainees filed out toward their next scheduled activity, Young intercepted Emily at the door. "Winters," he said, his voice neutral but his eyes intense. "A word." He led her to a quiet corner of the facility, positioning himself so his broad back shielded their conversation from curious onlookers. "That tattoo," he began without preamble. "I caught a glimpse. Eagle design." Emily maintained her composure, though internally she cursed the uniform tear. The partial exposure of her ghost talon insignia, an eagle's talon wrapped around a human skull, was an unexpected complication. "Just something personal, Sergeant," she replied evenly. "Had it done after completing my first technical certification." Young studied her with the experienced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating people under pressure. looked military. Inspired by it, she acknowledged with a casual shrug, "My father was Army. It's a tribute." He nodded slowly, not entirely convinced, but unwilling to press further without cause. "Get that uniform replaced before tomorrow's session. Proper appearance standards apply even in combat training." "Yes, Sergeant." As she turned to leave, Young added, "And winters that throw you, used on Wilson, that's not standard Army combat training." It wasn't a question, but the implication was clear. Emily met his gaze steadily. "I've had eclectic instructors, Sergeant." Something like recognition flickered in Young's eyes, a veteran recognizing another's unspoken history. He nodded once. "Carry on, Lieutenant." Emily left the training facility aware that her cover hadn't been compromised, but the margins had narrowed. Between Ryan's wounded pride, Megan's calculated observations, Jenkins's perceptive comments, and now Young's interest in her tattoo, the number of eyes watching her had multiplied. She would need to be even more careful moving forward, a ghost walking an increasingly crowded path, where shadows to hide in were growing scarcer by the hour. That evening, as trainees gathered in the dining facility for dinner, the social dynamics had shifted noticeably. Ryan's core group still occupied the center tables, but their usual boisterous confidence had quieted to intense discussion. Emily, taking her usual corner position, caught frequent glances in her direction. She had just started on her meal when a tray clattered down across from her. Megan Collins slid into the seat with fluid grace, her smile bright and apparently friendly. "Mind if I join you? Thought us girls should stick together." Emily gestured to the seat Megan had already claimed. "Free country." Megan leaned forward, lowering her voice conspirationally. "You made quite an impression today." Ryan's ego is seriously bruised. "He'll recover," Emily replied, taking a bite of her food. "Oh, I know he will. Men like that always do." Megan stirred her salad thoughtfully. "But he's also dangerous when he feels challenged. You might want to watch your back." The warning might have seemed genuine from anyone else. Coming from Megan, with her calculating eyes and too perfect appearance, it carried undercurrents of something else entirely. "I always do," Emily replied simply. Megan studied her with open curiosity. "You're not what I expected, you know. When they told me another woman had joined the program, I pictured someone more obvious, the typical female soldier trying to prove herself in a man's world." "Sorry to disappoint." "Oh, it's not disappointment." Megan's smile sharpened slightly. "It's intrigue. You're not trying to prove anything to anyone. It's like you already know your own worth." Emily met her gaze steadily. "Most people do if they're honest with themselves." Megan took a delicate bite of her salad. "I caught a glimpse of your tattoo during the match. Eagle-right military symbolism." The question was too pointed, too interested to be casual conversation. Emily maintained her neutral expression. "Just personal significance," she replied, deliberately vague. "Nothing special." "I have one too," Megan offered, touching her hip briefly. "Compass rose. Reminds me to always know where I'm going." She smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "Maybe we can compare ink sometime." Before Emily could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Lieutenant Colonel Carter entered the dining facility, followed by a distinguished-looking older man in civilian clothing. The room immediately quieted, trainees straightening in their seats with ingrained military respect. "Attention on deck," Young called out, and everyone rose to their feet. Carter raised a hand. "As you were, continue your meal." The trainees resumed their seats, but all eyes remained on the visitors as they made their way through the facility, Carter pointing out various features to his companion. Emily recognized the civilian immediately, though she gave no outward sign. General Thomas Wilson, Ryan's father, current Deputy Director of Special Operations Command, and one of the most influential figures in modern military strategy. His presence at Fort Harrison wasn't unusual, given his son's participation in the program, but the timing just hours after Ryan's public defeat on the training mat suggested more than a routine visit. Across the room, Ryan stood to greet his father, their physical resemblance striking despite the 30-year age difference. The general clasped his son's shoulder with obvious pride before continuing his tour with Carter. As they passed near Emily's table, the general's gaze swept over her briefly, his expression revealing nothing. But something in his eyes, a momentary sharpening of focus, suggested recognition of some kind, though they had never officially met. When they had moved on, Megan leaned forward again. "That's Ryan's father. Impressive man. Rumor has it he's personally overseeing the new weapon system being tested here next month. Emily took a sip of water. Interesting. Megan agreed, her eyes following the general's progress. The Black Talon missile defense system could change the balance of power in 3 different global hotspots. No wonder security's been increased around here. The casual mention of a classified weapon system, one that wasn't supposed to be common knowledge among trainees, confirmed Emily's suspicions about Megan's role. Either she had access to information beyond her station, or she was deliberately revealing what she knew to gauge Emily's reaction. "I wouldn't know about that," Emily replied with perfect neutrality. "I'm just here for the training." Megan's smile returned sharp as a blade. "Aren't we all?" After dinner, Emily returned to the barracks alone, Megan having joined Ryan's group for what appeared to be an evening of socialization in the recreation area. The empty building provided a rare opportunity for secure communication. Checking carefully for surveillance, Emily removed the pendant from around her neck and connected it to her receiver. "Urgent update, General Wilson on site, potential security breach discussion. Observed new variable Collins M. High probability operative request background verification." The response came quickly. "Intel received Collins' background under our review. Maintain distance from Wilson G. Accelerate surveillance deployment phase 3 authorization granted." Emily acknowledged the instructions and disconnected, restoring the pendant to its hiding place. Phase 3 authorization meant she could now access more advanced surveillance equipment and expand her operational parameters. As she prepared for bed, the barracks door opened, admitting Megan in mid-conversation with someone outside. Her laughter carried across the empty space, bright and calculated. "Absolutely join you tomorrow." "Sounds fun." She closed the door and turned, her smile fading slightly when she saw Emily already in the room. "Oh, hey, thought you might be at the gym or something. Ryan and some of the guys are doing an unofficial poker game in the rec room. You should come." Emily shook her head. "Early morning tomorrow, rain environment navigation exercise." "Right, almost forgot about that." Megan began her evening routine, the motions practiced and efficient. "Ryan's still pretty worked up about today, by the way. He's convinced you got lucky." "Let him think that." Megan paused, studying Emily's reflection in the mirror as she brushed her hair. "You don't care what any of them think, do you?" "It's fascinating." Emily shrugged. "I'm here to learn, not make friends." "Smart approach." Megan finished with her hair and turned. "Though allies can be useful in a place like this." "Are you offering to be my ally?" "Lieutenant Collins." Something calculating flickered in Megan's eyes. "I'm saying we might have more in common than you think." The statement hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Emily held her gaze steadily. "Maybe we do," she allowed. "Time will tell." Megan's smile returned, enigmatic and confident. "Yes, it will." Later, as lights out approached and Megan showered, Emily lay in her bunk reviewing the day's developments. The appearance of General Wilson, Megan's pointed questions about her tattoo, Young's growing suspicion, Ryan's wounded pride, all variables in an increasingly complex equation. And beneath it all, the persistent question who at Fort Harrison was feeding classified information to Black Crescent. The weapons test was still weeks away, but preparations were already underway. Every day that passed increased the risk of critical information being compromised. As Emily finally drifted towards sleep, her mind cycling through contingencies and scenarios, one thought remained clear. Her cover as an unremarkable lieutenant was becoming harder to maintain. Soon she would need to either retreat further into the shadows or step into the light as something else entirely. Either way, the ghost who walked among the living would need to make her choice before that choice was made for her. Dawn broke over Fort Harrison with sheets of relentless rain. The sky hung low and heavy, turning the morning twilight into something more suited to dusk. Perfect weather for the wilderness navigation exercise scheduled to begin at 0600. Emily stood motionless under the partial shelter of the assembly area's overhang, rain drumming against her patrol cap and sliding down the back of her neck. Around her, 40 other trainees shifted uncomfortably, their discomfort evident in hunched shoulders and tight expressions. Only she remained perfectly still, the rain an old companion rather than an adversary. Master Sergeant Young paced before them, seemingly oblivious to the downpour soaking his uniform. "Weather is the great equalizer," he announced, voice carrying over the steady patter. "In ideal conditions, anyone can follow a map. Today you'll prove you can navigate when Mother Nature herself becomes the enemy." Behind him, 4 trucks weighted canvas covers stretched tight over their beds. Emily noted the mud already caking their tires. They'd been out before dawn setting up the exercise. Teams of 4, Young continued, assigned squads. You'll be dropped at different points within a 20-square-mile area of Virginia woodland. Your objective: reach the extraction point within 12 hours using only map, compass, and your own capabilities. He gestured to the assistant instructors distributing waterproof map cases. Inside each packet is your team's specific route. Follow it exactly. Monitoring stations are positioned throughout the area. Deviate from your assigned path, you fail. Miss a checkpoint, you fail. Arrive late, you fail. The rain intensified, drumming against the metal roof overhead. Young seemed to take satisfaction in the worsening conditions. This isn't just about navigation, he added, scanning the assembled trainees. It's about endurance, teamwork, and adaptation. The terrain is challenging. The weather is unforgiving. How you handle both will tell us more about your capabilities than any classroom exercise ever could. Emily accepted her team's packet from an assistant instructor, already knowing which faces would appear on the assignment sheet inside. The same squad from hand-to-hand training: herself, Ryan Wilson, Megan Collins, and Matthew Jenkins. An intentional grouping that promised complications beyond mere navigation. Young confirmed her expectation moments later, reading off team assignments that placed her exactly where she'd anticipated. Ryan's face darkened when their names were called together, while Megan's expression remained calculatedly neutral. Only Jenkins showed no reaction at all, his weathered features revealing nothing of his thoughts. Trucks depart in 5 minutes, Young concluded. Squad leaders, collect your equipment packs. 1 per team, use it wisely. Ryan stepped forward immediately, asserting his position as their de facto leader. He returned moments later with a sealed waterproof bag, which he opened with theatrical authority. Standard wilderness kit, he announced, laying out the contents. First aid supplies, emergency rations, basic shelter materials, single canteen, water purification tablets. He looked up at the team, his gaze deliberately skipping over Emily. We'll need to find water sources along the route. The Cairns River crosses through the northern section, Jenkins observed, studying the map Emily had unfolded under the shelter. We can refill there if needed. Emily traced their assigned route with a finger, memorizing key features and potential hazards. The path wound through dense woodland, crossed 2 ridgelines, and followed a stream bed for nearly 3 miles before reaching the extraction point. Under normal conditions, a challenging but straightforward journey. In this weather, significantly more dangerous. 12 hours is plenty of time, Ryan said with unwarranted confidence. We could run this in 8 easy. Not in this weather, Emily countered quietly. The streams section will be flooding by midday. We'll need to pace ourselves. Ryan's eyes narrowed. I wasn't aware we had a meteorologist in our squad. Just experience, she replied evenly. Flash floods are common in terrain like this after sustained rainfall. She's right, Jenkins interjected before Ryan could respond. I've seen what Virginia rainwater can do to dry creek beds. Turns them into death traps within hours. Megan adjusted her rain gear, her movements precise and economical. We should move out. Standing here debating weather patterns won't get us to the extraction point. The 4 of them joined the line, boarding the transport trucks. As they climbed aboard, Emily noted the deliberate separation between teams' canvas dividers, creating isolated compartments within each vehicle. No opportunity to observe other teams' preparations or routes. Their section contained 4 bench seats facing inward, forcing them into proximity despite the obvious tension. Ryan positioned himself across from Emily, his gaze challenging. Jenkins took the spot beside her while Megan settled next to Ryan, her posture perfect, despite the truck's uncomfortable accommodation. The vehicle lurched into motion, beginning the journey that would take them to their drop point. Through gaps in the canvas, Emily caught glimpses of the base disappearing behind them, then forest roads emerging ahead, their surfaces turning to mud under the persistent rain. No one spoke during the 30-minute drive. The engine noise and drumming rain made conversation difficult, but the silence stemmed more from the unresolved dynamics between them. Ryan's wounded pride, Megan's calculating assessment, Jenkins's quiet observation, Emily's necessary distance. When the truck finally ground to a halt, an assistant instructor pulled back the canvas flap, revealing a nondescript section of forest road bordered by dense pines. Rain continued its relentless assault, visibility reduced to less than 100 yards through the gray curtain. Team 4, this is your insertion point, DH, the instructor had announced. Bearing to first checkpoint is 057 degrees distance, approximately 3 miles. Clock starts now. They disembarked into ankle-deep mud, the truck pulling away as soon as the last boot hit the ground. Within seconds, the vehicle disappeared into the rain, leaving them alone in the wilderness. Ryan immediately took charge, compass in hand. First leg is northeast through that section of pine forest. Jenkins take point. Collins center with the pack. Winters rear guard. The positioning was deliberate, keeping Emily at the back where he could ignore her while maintaining authority over the group. She accepted the assignment without comment, falling into place as they moved into the tree line. The forest welcomed them with dripping branches and treacherous footing. Pine needles, normally providing reliable traction, had transformed into a slippery carpet under the deluge. Every step required careful placement, every handhold tested before bearing weight. They moved in silence for the first mile, each focused on the demanding terrain. Jenkins navigated with the quiet competence of someone who had moved through hostile environment genres before selecting passages that minimized their exposure to the worst of the conditions. Behind him, Ryan maintained a punishing pace, clearly intent on proving his earlier claim about completing the course in record time. Megan kept up effortlessly, her movements displaying the same practiced efficiency Emily had observed before. Nothing about her suggested struggle or discomfort despite conditions that would challenge even experienced operators. Emily maintained her position at the rear, using the vantage point to study her teammates while monitoring their back trail. The rain obscured visibility, but her trained senses detected subtle changes in the forest rhythm, the movement of wildlife, the shift in wind patterns, the gradual transformation of dry ground into saturated earth that would soon become dangerous. An hour into their journey, they reached the first checkpoint, a small orange marker attached to a tree barely visible through the rain. Ryan photographed it with the team's assigned camera, documenting their progress as required. "One down," he announced with satisfaction. "We're making good time." Jenkins consulted the map, water beating on the protective case. "Next section gets steeper. First ridgeline is ahead." "We maintain pace," Ryan decided. "No reason to slow down yet." Emily spoke up for the first time since their departure. "The map shows loose shale on the eastern approach to that ridge. In this rain, it'll be unstable." Ryan turned to her, irritation evident in his stance. "You have a better suggestion, Winters. Northwestern approach adds half a mile, but gives us solid footing on granite outcroppings. Safer and potentially faster overall." For a moment, it seemed Ryan would dismiss her input purely out of pride. Then Jenkins nodded. "She's right. I've trained in these mountains before. The eastern path becomes a slide in weather like this." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine. Northwestern approach it is." As they adjusted their route, Emily caught Megan watching her with renewed interest, something calculating in her gaze. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken exchange passing between them, two predators recognizing each other's capability. The Northwestern path proved as challenging as Emily had anticipated, but for different reasons. The granite outcroppings provided secure footing, but required technical climbing in several sections. Ryan led these with obvious skill, his athletic build and natural strength well suited to the task. When they reached a particularly steep section, he turned to Emily with poorly disguised expectation of her struggle. Instead, she ascended with fluid efficiency, her hands finding natural holds invisible to untrained eyes, her body moving with the balanced precision of someone who had scaled far more demanding surfaces under far worse conditions. At the top, Ryan's expression flickered with renewed suspicion. "Where'd you learn to climb like that, Winters? Thought you were a support officer." "Rock climbing club in college," she replied with casual ease. "Kept it up as a hobby." He clearly didn't believe her, but they had no time for interrogation. The ridge line exposed them to the full force of the wind rain driving horizontally into their faces. They needed to descend quickly to regain the relative shelter of the forest. The second checkpoint awaited them at the bottom of the ridge, another orange marker, this one attached to a fallen tree spanning a swollen creek. Jenkins photographed it while Ryan consulted the map for their next bearing. "We're ahead of schedule," he announced with satisfaction. "Next section follows this creek for about a mile before turning east toward the river crossing." Emily studied the creek with concern. Already it had risen several inches above its normal banks, water moving with dangerous speed. By afternoon, it would be a raging torrent. We should move away from the waterway, she suggested. Higher ground runs parallel about 50 yards that way. Ryan frowned. The map clearly shows the path following the creek bed. The map was drawn in dry conditions. This is turning into a flood zone. Their discussion was interrupted by a distant rumble, not thunder, but the ominous sound of water moving with tremendous force somewhere upstream. Jenkins's head snapped up, recognizing the danger immediately. Flash flood, he said sharply. Move, now. They scrambled up the nearest incline, reaching higher ground just as a wall of debris-laden water surged around the bend, transforming the creek from a manageable waterway into a destructive force of nature. Trees, branches, and earth tumbled in the churning brown water. Jesus, Ryan breathed, watching as their planned route disappeared beneath the deluge. Emily said nothing, but her earlier warning hung between them unspoken. She'd predicted exactly this scenario, and had they followed the creek as Ryan intended, they might now be fighting for their lives in that torrent. We need to report this, Megan said, reaching for the emergency radio in their pack. The instructors should know the conditions are deteriorating. Jenkins shook his head. Part of the test. They're monitoring the weather. If they wanted to extract us, they would. So we find an alternate route, Ryan concluded, studying the map with newfound respect for the conditions. Winters, since you seem to know these conditions so well, what do you suggest? It was the first time he'd directly asked for her input, a small but significant shift in their dynamic. Emily pointed to a contour line on the map. This ridge extends for 3 miles. If we follow it east, we can bypass the flood zone entirely and rejoin our route here near the river crossing. She traced the path with her finger. Adds distance, but saves time compared to finding another creek crossing. Ryan considered the suggestion, then nodded. Makes sense. Jenkins take point again. Same formation. They moved out, the group's rhythm subtly altered. Ryan still maintained his position of authority, but the earlier dismissal of Emily's input had given way to grudging recognition of her practical knowledge. The ridge path proved challenging in different ways. Dense undergrowth tore at their clothing thorns, finding exposed skin despite their protective gear. The rain continued unabated, reducing visibility and turning the ground beneath the vegetation into treacherous mud. 3 hours into their journey, as they navigated a particularly difficult section, Megan slipped on hidden roots and went down hard, a sharp cry escaping her as she fell. Emily reached her first medical training, overriding operational caution. Where are you hurt? Megan grimaced, clutching her right ankle. Twisted it. Not broken, I think, but definitely sprained. Ryan and Jenkins joined them, concern evident, despite the competitive environment ahead. A team member's injury affected their collective success. Can you walk? Ryan asked, his tone more gentle than Emily had heard from him before. Megan tested the ankle, gingerly wincing. Yes, but not quickly. You should go ahead without me. I'll catch up as best I can. That's not happening, Jenkins said firmly. We move as a team. Emily was already reaching for the first aid kit, extracting an elastic bandage. This will stabilize it. Cold compress would help with swelling, but in this weather... She trailed off with a wry smile that Megan unexpectedly returned, a moment of shared gallows humor about their soaking conditions making ice unnecessary. I'll wrap it, Emily continued, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The compression will help, but you'll need to keep weight off it as much as possible. As she worked, she noticed something odd. Megan's ankle, while showing signs of a genuine sprain, also bore a curious mark just above the joint. A small, nearly invisible scar in the shape of what appeared to be a crescent moon. Deliberately placed, not accidental. Emily completed the wrapping without comment, but filed the observation away. The marking matched intelligence reports about black crescent operatives, a small identifier typically hidden on the body, visible only in circumstances like these. We need to fashion a walking stick, Jenkins suggested, already scanning nearby trees for a suitable branch. Ryan nodded. I'll help. Winters is stay with Collins. As the men moved away, Megan leaned closer to Emily, her voice dropping to ensure privacy. Nice field medicine skills, she observed. Pretty advanced for someone with your background. Emily maintained her cover seamlessly. Basic first aid is required for all officers. Nothing special about it. Megan's eyes held that calculating look again. You know, I've been watching you, Emily. The way you move, the way you assess situations. You remind me of someone I knew once. That's so. Megan nodded slowly. A woman I worked with briefly, same quiet competence, same careful distance. She wasn't what she appeared to be either. The implication hung between them, neither a direct accusation nor an innocent observation. Emily met her gaze steadily. Most people have depths others don't see, she replied neutrally, especially in our line of work. Megan's smile held secrets of its own. Indeed they do. Their conversation ended as Ryan and Jenkins returned with a sturdy branch properly sized and stripped of twigs to serve as a walking staff. Jenkins had even carved rudimentary handholds into the wood, a small touch that spoke to his field experience. With Megan's injury, their pace slowed considerably. The original 12-hour timeline now seemed optimistic at best. Ryan, to his credit, adjusted their route to accommodate the changed circumstances, selecting paths with more gradual inclines and firmer footing. By midday, they'd reached the river crossing, normally a shallow ford, now a surging waterway nearly 40 feet across. The rain had transformed it into a dangerous obstacle, its brown waters carrying debris from upstream flooding. That's not crossable, Jenkins stated flatly, assessing the current with experienced eyes. Not safely. Ryan consulted the map with growing frustration. There's no other crossing point marked within 5 miles. There, Emily said, pointing upstream. See that fallen pine spanning the narrowest section? We can use it as a makeshift bridge. The tree she'd indicated stretched almost completely across the river, creating a precarious but possible crossing point. Ryan studied it skeptically. It's at least 30 feet of open water. With Collins injured, I can make it, Megan insisted, testing her wrapped ankle. The alternative is failing the exercise. Jenkins examined the tree through tactical eyes. It's doable. I'll go first, secure a guide rope. Wilson follows, then Collins with assistance, Winters last, to ensure everyone makes it. Ryan nodded, accepting the logical distribution of tasks. Jenkins, the most experienced with hazardous terrain, would face the greatest risk as pathfinder. Emily, with her demonstrated climbing ability, would serve as safety backup. They proceeded according to plan, Jenkins crossing first with a length of rope from their equipment pack. He moved with the careful confidence of someone who had traversed far more dangerous obstacles, testing each section of the fallen tree before committing his weight. Reaching the far side, he secured the rope to create a makeshift handrail. Ryan followed, moving with athletic grace despite the slippery surface. Megan went next, Jenkins and Ryan providing stabilizing tension on the rope, while Emily supported her initial steps onto the log. Halfway across, disaster struck. A section of waterlogged bark gave way beneath Megan's boot, sending her lurching sideways. She maintained her grip on the rope, but lost her footing, her injured ankle unable to compensate as she slipped from the log. Emily reacted instantly. Without hesitation, she launched herself onto the makeshift bridge, covering the distance to Megan's position with inhuman speed. Her hand shot out, grasping Megan's wrist, just as the other woman lost her grip on the guideline. For a heartbeat, they hung suspended above the rushing water, Megan dangling from Emily's grip. Emily herself balanced precariously on the log, with one hand and both feet providing tenuous stability. With a display of strength that belied her size, Emily pulled Megan upward, allowing her to regain her hold on the rope. Only then did she realize her mistake. She'd moved too quickly, responded too efficiently for her cover identity. The look in Megan's eyes confirmed it. No support officer possessed such reflexes or strength. No ordinary lieutenant could have covered that distance in the time available. Emily maintained her operational focus despite the exposure, helping Megan complete the crossing before traversing the log herself. On the far bank, Ryan stared at her with undisguised suspicion. That was, he began, then stopped, seemingly unable to find appropriate words. Lucky, Emily supplied, deliberately downplaying her actions. Adrenaline does strange things. Jenkins' expression suggested he knew better, but he offered the group an exit from the awkward moment. We should keep moving. Still have 4 miles to the extraction point, and Collins needs medical attention for that ankle. They continued their journey, but something fundamental had changed. The dynamic between them had shifted from simple competitive tension to something more complex. Ryan watched Emily with new wariness. Megan studied her with intensified interest. Jenkins maintained his quiet observation, but his protective positioning suggested he'd made his own assessments about who represented the greatest capability and potentially the greatest threat within their group. The afternoon brought new challenges as the terrain shifted from forest to more exposed rocky outcroppings. The rain finally began to slacken, but left behind a landscape transformed by water-slick surfaces, unstable ground, and the constant threat of hypothermia from their soaked condition. At their fourth checkpoint, Ryan called a brief halt to reassess their situation. "We've got about 3 hours until the extraction window closes," he noted, checking the team's watch against the fading daylight. "Collins, how's the ankle holding up?" Megan tested her weight gingerly. "Functional, not pretty, but I can keep moving." Emily noticed something odd in Megan's demeanor. The injury seemed to be troubling her less than it should, given the severity of the sprain. Either she possessed remarkable pain tolerance, or the injury hadn't been as serious as it appeared. Both possibilities raised questions about her true capabilities. "We need to pick up the pace," Ryan decided. The next section crosses exposed ridgeline, limited cover but direct route to our final checkpoint. Jenkins studied the darkening sky with experienced eyes. "Weather's shifting again. Might get a break in the rain, but temperature's dropping. Exposure becomes our enemy now." Emily nodded agreement. "Hypothermia is a real risk. We should maintain close formation for the ridge crossing, conserve body heat." They moved out with renewed purpose, their earlier antagonism temporarily set aside in favor of collective survival. The ridge proved as challenging as expected windswept rock, with minimal vegetation offering no protection from the elements. Halfway across, as they navigated a particularly exposed section, Emily's instincts flared. Something had changed in their environment, a subtle shift in the wind pattern, a momentary stillness in the ambient sounds of wilderness. She scanned their surroundings with heightened awareness, years of operational experience translating into a sixth sense for danger. There, a flash of movement on a parallel ridge approximately 800 yards east, then another on their own ridgeline, perhaps 400 yards ahead. "Contact," she said quietly, the word emerging automatically from her tactical training. 2 o'clock and 12 o'clock. Jenkins reacted immediately, dropping into a defensive posture. Ryan and Megan looked confused until Jenkins clarified. "We're being observed." He explained, his own experienced eyes confirming Emily's assessment. "2 positions, possibly more." "Instructors," Ryan suggested, though his hand had instinctively moved to where a sidearm would normally be holstered. "Maybe," Jenkins acknowledged, "or local hunters. Either way, best to identify ourselves." Emily knew better. The positions had been chosen with tactical precision, elevated with clear fields of fire, maintaining visual contact without exposing the observers. Not hunters and not typical training staff. This was surveillance with military precision. "We should move off the ridge line," she suggested, keeping her voice casual despite her internal alert status. "Less exposed in the tree line below." Ryan started to object, then reconsidered as another flash of movement caught his attention. His military instincts, while less developed than Emily's, were still sound enough to recognize potential threat patterns. "Agreed," he said, nodding toward a cluster of pines 50 yards downslope. That direction controlled pace, no sudden movements. They proceeded according to his instruction, maintaining the appearance of a training team, making a rational decision about terrain rather than responding to potential surveillance. Emily positioned herself at the rear, using the opportunity to study their observers without obvious attention. The figures had disappeared from view, but she felt their presence nonetheless, the weight of focused observation, the subtle disturbance in the natural patterns of the wilderness. Someone was tracking their progress with professional interest. Once they reached the relative cover of the pines, Ryan turned to Emily with undisguised intensity. "You spotted them before anyone else. How?" Emily maintained her cover. "Just happened to be looking in that direction." "Bullshit," Ryan replied flatly. "You said contact before you even pointed them out. That's combat terminology, not support officer language." Before she could respond, Jenkins intervened. "Does it matter? We're off the ridge now. Let's focus on reaching extraction." Ryan wasn't satisfied but recognized the pragmatic need to continue their mission. The exchange, however, had added another layer to his suspicion. Emily noted Megan watching the interaction with calculated interest, filing away each detail for future reference. The final leg of their journey took them through dense forest as daylight began to fade. The combination of thick cloud cover and approaching evening created a premature twilight, reducing visibility and increasing the challenge of navigation. Jenkins took the lead through this section, his experience evident in the way he selected their path, balancing the need for direct routing against the practicalities of terrain and Megan's injury. Ryan stayed close to Megan, occasionally offering his arm for support when the ground became particularly treacherous. Emily maintained a rear security still alert for signs of the observers she'd spotted earlier. They hadn't reappeared, but she sensed they remained nearby, tracking the team's progress from concealed positions. As they approached their final checkpoint before extraction, the forest opened into a small clearing surrounding a decrepit hunting cabin. Long abandoned, its roof partially collapsed and its walls reclaimed by vegetation. Their marker was attached to what remained of the front door. Ryan photographed it with evident relief. Last checkpoint, extraction point is 1 mile northeast from here. We've got, he checked his watch, just under 2 hours to make the window. Plenty of time, Jenkins confirmed, even with our reduced pace. Megan leaned against the cabin wall, taking weight off her injured ankle. Should we rest briefly? 5 minutes to regroup before the final push? Ryan considered this, then nodded. Quick break. Check equipment, hydrate if needed. As the team settled into temporary stillness, Emily circled the cabin's perimeter, maintaining the appearance of routine security while actually conducting a more thorough assessment of their surroundings. The weather had cleared somewhat, allowing better visibility, but the fading light created new shadows and hiding places. She completed her circuit and returned to find Ryan and Jenkins in quiet discussion while Megan rested her ankle. All three looked up as she approached. Perimeter secure, Ryan asked the question, carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. Emily nodded. Clear for now, no sign of our ridge observers. Good. Ryan glanced at Jenkins, some unspoken communication passing between them. Because we need to talk about what happened at the river crossing. Emily maintained her neutral expression, though internally she prepared for potential compromise of her cover. What about it? You moved impossibly fast, Ryan stated bluntly. No hesitation, no wasted motion. The kind of reaction that comes from extensive tactical training, not rock climbing clubs. And you used a specific hand position to grab my wrist. Megan added, her earlier pretense of friendly collegiality dropped entirely. The exact grip taught in advanced rescue operations, specialized knowledge for specialized operators. Emily assessed her options quickly. Full denial would only increase their suspicion. Partial acknowledgement might satisfy immediate curiosity while preserving her deeper cover. I have some additional training not reflected in my official record, she admitted, selecting her words carefully. Volunteer search and rescue during college. Advanced wilderness survival courses on my own time. Ryan's eyes narrowed. That doesn't explain your weapon disassembly time or your combat terminology. Or your tattoo, Megan added pointedly, the one you've been so careful to keep covered. The conversation had moved into dangerous territory. Emily needed to redirect without appearing defensive. Jenkins unexpectedly provided an opening. Does it matter right now? We have an extraction to make an injured team member and unknown observers in the area. Whatever Winter's background might be, she's demonstrated nothing but benefit to this team. Ryan considered this military pragmatism temporarily overriding his suspicion. Fair point, but this conversation isn't over Winters, not by a long shot. Understood. Emily acknowledged, grateful for Jenkins' intervention while recognizing its limitations. Her cover hadn't been blown entirely, but it had been compromised. She would need to report this development to Shepard at the earliest opportunity. They gathered their equipment and moved out, the dynamic between them now charged with unresolved questions and heightened awareness. The final mile to the extraction point would be as much psychological navigation as physical. The terrain cooperated, at least offering relatively even ground through mature forest. Darkness had fallen completely, forcing them to rely on flashlights for the final approach. The extraction point itself appeared as a small clearing marked by chemical light sticks arranged in a precise pattern, a landing zone for the helicopter that would retrieve them. They arrived with 40 minutes to spare, their total journey time just under 11.5 hours. Despite the challenges, injuries, and detours, they had completed the assigned task within parameters. We made it, Ryan announced, the simple statement carrying the weight of their collective accomplishment. Jenkins nodded, professional satisfaction evident in his weathered features. Good teamwork despite everything. Emily remained alert, scanning the tree line, even as they settled in to await extraction. The observers from the ridge hadn't reappeared, but her operational instincts remained elevated. Something about their presence had felt deliberate, targeted, not the random encounter Ryan had dismissed as training staff or hunters. Her vigilance proved justified 20 minutes later when a figure emerged from the forest edge. not approaching directly, but positioning himself where the team would clearly see him. Military bearing. Civilian clothing face partially obscured by the shadows. Ryan tensed immediately, moving protectively toward Megan despite their earlier confrontation. Jenkins shifted to a flanking position, his body language communicating readiness without overt aggression. Emily recognized the figure instantly, though she gave no outward sign. Colonel Thomas Shepard Harrison, her handler, the man who should be nowhere near this training exercise. His presence meant only one thing: the mission parameters had changed significantly. Emergency protocol was in effect. Shepard made no move to approach further, simply standing at the forest edge where Emily could clearly see him. He lifted his hand briefly, executing a series of subtle finger positions that would appear to casual observers as nothing more than a man flexing stiff joints. To Emily, it was clear communication: compromise imminent, prepare for emergency extraction, mission priority elevated. She acknowledged with an equally subtle adjustment of her stance: confirmation received, awaiting instructions. Ryan had noticed the exchange despite its subtlety. "You know that man?" He said, not a question, but a statement of observed fact. Before Emily could respond, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance. Extraction approaching ahead of schedule, another indicator of changed mission parameters. Shepard melted back into the forest as quickly as he had appeared, leaving Emily to manage the immediate situation with her increasingly suspicious teammates. "He's probably part of the evaluation team," she suggested, the explanation plausible enough to create uncertainty. Ryan did not appear convinced, but the approaching helicopter demanded their attention. Its powerful searchlight swept the clearing as it descended rotors, whipping the surrounding vegetation into a frenzy. As they prepared to board, Emily noted something odd about the aircraft: not the training program's usual UH-60 Blackhawk, but a modified MH-6 Little Bird, a special operations vehicle, not standard training equipment. Jenkins noticed too, his expression sharpening with recognition. He caught Emily's eye, unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever was happening had escalated beyond a simple training exercise. They boarded quickly, securing themselves as the pilot immediately initiated ascent without the standard post-extraction briefing. Emily found herself seated directly across from Megan, their knees nearly touching in the compact cabin. Megan leaned forward, her voice pitched below the rotor noise, but still audible to Emily. "When we get back, you and I need to have a private conversation." The statement carried layers of meaning: threat, curiosity, professional recognition. Emily met her gaze steadily. "I look forward to it," she replied, matching Megan's tone precisely. As the helicopter banked sharply, heading back toward Fort Harrison, Emily mentally prepared for the coming escalation. Her cover had been compromised on multiple fronts. Shepard's appearance signaled critical developments in the mission. The modified extraction vehicle suggested high-level involvement. Whatever intelligence Ghost Talon had uncovered about Black Crescent's activities at Fort Harrison, it had accelerated the timeline dramatically. The quiet infiltration phase of her mission had ended. Now came the dangerous part, when ghosts were forced to step into the light, revealing themselves to enemies and allies alike. For someone who had operated in shadows for so long, it was the most perilous transition imaginable. Emily Winters, the unremarkable lieutenant, would soon give way to the operative she truly was. The only question remaining: how many people would survive the revelation? The helicopter touched down on Fort Harrison's main landing pad with practiced precision, its rotors slowing but not stopping. A clear indication this was not the end of its mission. Emily noted the unusual reception committee waiting for them: Lieutenant Colonel Carter, Master Sergeant Young, and 4 military police officers positioned at tactical intervals around the perimeter. No standard training staff, no medical personnel for Megan's injury, just authority and security. Ryan noticed it too, his body language shifting from exhausted satisfaction to alert wariness as they disembarked. Jenkins moved with similar caution, years of operational experience translating into heightened awareness. Only Megan seemed unsurprised by the reception, her injured ankle suddenly bearing weight with remarkable resilience. Carter stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled tension. "Wilson Jenkins, report to Briefing Room A immediately. Collins Medical is waiting for you in Building 17. He turned to Emily, his voice dropping slightly. "Winters, you're with me." The deliberate separation was textbook counterintelligence protocol. Divide subjects, control information flow, assess discrepancies in individual accounts. Emily had been on the administering end of such tactics before. Now she found herself on the receiving end. Ryan hesitated, glancing between Emily and Carter with unconcealed suspicion. Sir, with respect, what's going on? Our team just completed the navigation exercise successfully. Standard protocol would be— This isn't standard anything, Lieutenant, Carter interrupted sharply. Follow your orders. Military discipline prevailed. Ryan and Jenkins moved toward the indicated building, though both cast final looks at Emily. Ryan's filled with unanswered questions, Jenkins's with something closer to understanding. Megan lingered a moment longer than necessary, her eyes meeting Emily's with unmistakable meaning. Until our next conversation, Lieutenant Winters, she said softly, then turned to follow her escort to medical. Carter waited until the others were out of earshot before addressing Emily directly. Walk with me, Winters. They moved away from the landing pad, following a path that led toward the administrative section of the base. The night had fully claimed Fort Harrison, now the compound's security lighting creating pools of harsh illumination amid deepening shadows. Your extraction was moved up by direct order from command, Carter said, his voice carefully neutral. Unusual circumstances. Emily matched his pace and tone, maintaining her cover despite the rapidly deteriorating operational parameters. May I ask why, sir? You may ask, he replied with military precision, but I'm not authorized to answer. They continued in silence for several minutes, Carter deliberately taking an indirect route that avoided main thoroughfares and populated areas. Emily's tactical awareness identified their probable destination, the secure communications facility at the northern edge of the base, a building rarely used except for classified transmissions. Her suspicion proved correct as they approached the windowless structure, its entrance guarded by armed military police with significantly higher security clearance than standard base security. Carter badged them through without explanation, leading Emily down a sterile hallway to a reinforced door marked simply SecureCom 3. He swiped his access card, entered a code, and gestured for Emily to precede him. You're expected, he said, the words carrying subtle emphasis. The room beyond contained standard secure communication equipment, a conference table, and 3 individuals. General Thomas Wilson seated at the head of the table, a stern-faced woman in civilian clothing, whom Emily immediately identified as Department of Defense Intelligence Division, and Colonel Thomas Shepard Harrison standing by the far wall. Carter closed the door behind them, the electronic lock engaging with an audible click. Lieutenant Winters reporting as ordered, sir, Emily stated formally, her bearing perfect military professionalism despite the surreal circumstances. General Wilson studied her with calculating eyes, Ryan's features aged by 30 years and hardened by decades of command decisions. At ease, Lieutenant, though I suspect that's not your actual rank, is it? The direct confrontation confirmed what Emily had already deduced: her cover was completely compromised. She glanced at Shepard, receiving an almost imperceptible nod, authorization to acknowledge her true role. No, sir, it's not, she replied evenly. Perhaps introductions are in order. The civilian woman interjected, her voice carrying the crisp precision of someone accustomed to intelligence briefings. I'm Deputy Director Catherine Lane, DoD Intelligence Division. We're aware of your actual affiliation, Ms. Winters, or whatever your real name is. Emily remained silent, waiting. In these situations, volunteering information only limited future options. General Wilson leaned forward. Ghost Talon, an operational unit that officially doesn't exist, conducting missions that never happened. And you're wearing their mark. He tapped his own neck, indicating the location of Emily's concealed tattoo. The question is, are you actually sanctioned, or are you a rogue element? Shepard stepped forward, then his movement drawing all eyes. She's sanctioned, General. By the highest authority. Wilson's expression hardened. Colonel Harrison, imagine my surprise when base security flagged your presence in our training area today. A man who's supposedly been retired for 5 years appearing at the exact moment we detect a security breach. Not a coincidence, Shepard acknowledged calmly. Clearly not. Wilson turned back to Emily. So, Lieutenant Winters, would you care to explain why a Ghost Talon operative infiltrated my training program, and why your former commander decided to make an unauthorized appearance on my base? Emily met his gaze steadily. We're tracking a security breach connected to the Black Talon missile defense system, sir. Intelligence indicates classified information is being channeled from Fort Harrison to a hostile organization known as Black Crescent. Lane's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication that the information had surprised her. And you have evidence of this breach? Partial, Emily replied. Enough to justify the operation, not enough yet to identify all involved parties. Convenient, Wilson said coldly. You realize how this looks. An unauthorized operative with a cover identity conducting covert surveillance on a secure military installation, making accusations about security breaches without presenting evidence. The situation was deteriorating. Emily recognized the defensive posture of a senior officer who felt his command had been compromised, not by the breach he was investigating, but by her presence itself. General Shepard intervened. This operation was authorized through appropriate channels. The sensitivity of the intelligence required compartmentalization. Which conveniently excluded me, Wilson retorted sharply, the commanding officer responsible for the facility you infiltrated. The tension in the room escalated years of military hierarchy and interdepartmental rivalry, creating invisible battle lines. Emily maintained her professional composure, calculating her next move carefully. The mission remained the priority, regardless of personal risk. Sir, she addressed Wilson directly, our intelligence pointed to a high-level connection. The infiltration protocols required maximum operational security, including limiting knowledge of our presence. You're suggesting someone in my direct chain of command may be compromised. Wilson stated the accusation clear in his tone. I'm stating that our intelligence was insufficient to rule out any possibilities, sir. Before Wilson could respond, a sharp knock interrupted the confrontation. Carter moved to the door, opening it slightly to receive a message from one of the guards outside. His expression changed as he listened, then he closed the door and turned back to the room. Sir, there's been an incident. Lieutenant Collins has escaped from medical custody after incapacitating 2 MPs. And he hesitated. Lieutenant Wilson is missing as well. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Lane straightened in her chair, focus sharpening. Wilson's expression darkened with both concern and confusion. His son was involved now. When Shepard asked, already moving toward the door, 5 minutes ago, Carter replied. Security has initiated lockdown protocols, but Collins disabled the surveillance system in her sector before disappearing. Emily's mind raced through implications. Megan's escape confirmed her suspicions about the woman's true identity and capabilities. The timing suggested a planned extraction rather than opportunistic flight. Ryan's simultaneous disappearance added a complex variable, willing participant or hostage. General, she said with quiet urgency, this development supports our intelligence about Black Crescent. Lieutenant Collins has demonstrated behavior consistent with specialized training beyond her official record. The injury she sustained during our exercise was almost certainly intentional, a controlled wound designed to create sympathy and reduce suspicion about her capabilities. Wilson processed this with military efficiency, personal concern for his son visibly warring with professional responsibility. Assumptions without sufficient evidence, Lieutenant, but concerning nonetheless. He turned to Carter. Full lockdown. No one enters or leaves this base without direct authorization from me. Deploy tactical teams to secure the perimeter, focusing on eastern and southern boundaries. As Carter moved to relay these orders, Shepard caught Emily's eye, a silent communication passing between them. The eastern and southern perimeters were the most heavily guarded sections of Fort Harrison, and therefore the least likely escape routes for a professional operative like Megan. The western edge, with its maintenance access points and reduced surveillance coverage, presented the more probable exfiltration path. Permission to assist in the search, Sir, Emily requested formally. My familiarity with Collins's recent behavior patterns may prove valuable. Wilson hesitated, weighing operational necessity against his distrust of her unauthorized presence. Granted, he decided finally, but you'll be accompanied by trusted personnel at all times. Carter assigned a security team to shadow Lieutenant Winters. That won't be necessary, Shepard interjected. I'll accompany her personally. The statement carried the weight of decades of command experience, not a request, but a professional courtesy between senior officers. Wilson recognized the dynamic, nodding curtly, despite his evident dissatisfaction. Very well, but I want regular updates, and neither of you is authorized to leave this base under any circumstances. Emily and Shepard exited the secure communications room, moving with purposeful efficiency toward the western perimeter. Neither spoke until they were well away from the administrative area, their pace quick but measured to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Your cover's blown, Shepard stated quietly, the obvious fact serving as an entry point to more critical matters. Completely, Emily confirmed. Collins made the tattoo early this morning. She's been testing me ever since. Professional assessment. Black Crescent operative highly trained. The ankle injury was deliberate, gave her an excuse to delay our extraction while she transmitted something from the field. She maintained unnecessary physical contact with Ryan throughout the exercise, likely passing information or instructions. Shepard nodded, processing this with the calculating efficiency that had made him a legendary field commander. Wilson's son is either compromised or being used as leverage. Either way, he's in immediate danger. They reached the edge of the main compound, the western perimeter visible ahead, a chain-link fence topped with razor wire security lighting, creating alternating zones of harsh illumination and concealing shadow. Standard patrols had been doubled in response to the lockdown, but Emily immediately identified the pattern: weaknesses, predictable timing, consistent formations, observable blind spots. She'll use the maintenance tunnel, Emily predicted, indicating a drainage culvert that passed beneath the fence line. It's officially sealed, but actually accessible. I used it during my first week here. Agreed, Shepard replied. Timing. Emily checked her watch. Patrols converge at the northern junction in approximately 40 seconds, creating a 70-second window on this section. They moved without further discussion, decades of shared operational experience, allowing them to coordinate without explicit communication. Reaching the drainage access point, just as the patrol passed beyond visual range, they quickly removed the seemingly secure grate that concealed the entrance. The tunnel beyond was narrow and damp, requiring them to proceed in a crouched position. Emily led her smaller frame, navigating the confined space with practiced ease. Behind her, Shepard moved with the controlled efficiency of someone who had traversed far more challenging environments during his lengthy career. They emerged on the other side of the perimeter into dense woodland, immediately taking cover among the trees. Emily scanned their surroundings with heightened senses, identifying subtle signs of recent passage, displaced undergrowth, a broken twig, the faint imprint of a boot in soft earth. Two sets of tracks, she whispered, indicating the evidence. One deliberate, one less careful. Collins is leading Wilson away from the base. Shepard examined the trail with experienced eyes. No signs of coercion. He's following willingly, at least for now. Direction suggests they're heading toward the old fire road, Emily noted. Probable vehicle staged for extraction. Without further discussion, they began tracking the fugitives moving through the forest with the silent efficiency of predators. Emily's senses remained heightened, cataloging every sound and movement in their environment. Behind her, Shepard maintained protective distance, covering their rear approach. They had covered approximately half a mile when Emily froze, raising her fist in the universal military signal for immediate halt. Shepard complied, instantly scanning for the threat she had detected. Voices carried through the trees ahead, raised in what sounded like argument. Emily signaled their approach strategy, and they advanced using natural cover to conceal their movement. The scene that emerged from the darkness confirmed Emily's suspicions. A small clearing in the woods contained a nondescript black SUV with its engine running. Beside it stood Megan Collins, her injured ankle now bearing weight without any sign of discomfort, a handgun held casually but professionally at her side. Facing her, Ryan Wilson's expression conveyed confusion and growing anger. Never part of the arrangement, he was saying, his voice tight with tension. You said information only, not physical extraction. Megan's laugh carried no humor. Plans change, Ryan. Your father's security protocols have been compromised. We need you safely away from potential fallout. By kidnapping me at gunpoint, Ryan demanded, gesturing at the weapon in her hand. That's not protection, that's coercion. Insurance policy, Megan corrected smoothly. Once we're safely away, you'll understand the necessity. She gestured toward the vehicle. Now get in. We're already behind schedule. Emily assessed the tactical situation with lightning speed. Megan's position, the angle of her weapon, the distance to the vehicle, factors in the complex equation of potential engagement. Shepard caught her eye, a silent exchange of operational intentions passing between them. Before they could act, Ryan made his decision. No, he stated firmly, holding his ground. Whatever's happening here, I'm not going anywhere until I get straight answers. Megan's expression hardened, the false warmth she'd cultivated during training replaced by cold professionalism. This isn't a negotiation, Lieutenant Wilson. Your cooperation has been valuable, but is no longer strictly necessary. The information you've provided knowingly or otherwise has served its purpose. The implication hit Ryan visibly, realization dawning across his features. You used me, he said, the words half statement, half question. The questions about my father's security protocols, the interest in base operations. You were an accessible resource, Megan confirmed without remorse. Your eagerness to impress made you quite useful. Ryan's military training finally asserted itself. He shifted his stance, subtly weight-balanced. Hands relaxed but ready. I'm not going anywhere with you, and I'm certainly not helping you further compromise national security. Megan sighed, a sound of professional disappointment rather than emotional response. Then you've become a liability rather than an asset. She raised her weapon with practiced efficiency, aiming center mass. Nothing personal, Ryan, just operational necessity. Emily moved before the final word left Megan's lips. Bursting from cover with inhuman speed, she crossed the intervening space just as Megan's finger tightened on the trigger. Her hand struck Megan's wrist with precision, deflecting the shot into the ground as Ryan instinctively dove for cover. The two women separated instantly, each recognizing the other as a trained operative. Megan recovered quickly, her false injury completely forgotten, as she assumed a combat stance that revealed years of specialized training. I knew it, she said, a smile of professional appreciation crossing her features. Ghost Talon, I suspected from the moment I saw that tattoo. You people aren't supposed to exist anymore. Emily circled carefully, keeping herself between Megan and Ryan. Neither are Black Crescent operatives yet, here we are. Megan's smile widened slightly. Professional courtesy then. Operative to operative. Walk away, let me complete my extraction. Your mission parameters can't possibly include dying for Wilson's arrogant son. Actually, they do, Emily replied evenly. Protecting classified information and the personnel connected to it falls well within my operational jurisdiction. As they circled each other, Emily was acutely aware of the multiple tactical dimensions in play. Shepard had disappeared from view, repositioning for optimal intervention. Ryan had taken cover behind the vehicle but remained at risk. Megan still held her weapon, though it remained temporarily aimed away from any targets. Last chance, Megan offered, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. Professional to professional. Emily's response was movement rather than words. She closed distance with explosive speed, targeting Megan's weapon hand with a precision strike. Megan countered with practiced efficiency, using Emily's momentum to create separation while maintaining control of her firearm. What followed was a display of combat expertise few would ever witness, two elite operatives with comparable training engaging at the highest level of physical conflict. Megan fired twice each shot calculated despite the close-quarter struggle. Emily evaded with millimeter precision, one bullet grazing her jacket as she executed a disarming technique that finally separated Megan from her weapon. The gun skittered across the clearing, disappearing into underbrush as the engagement transitioned to pure hand-to-hand combat. Megan adapted instantly, her style shifting to incorporate more aggressive strikes, a blend of military and specialized techniques that confirmed her extensive training. Emily matched her with equal skill, each movement economical and purposeful. They exchanged a flurry of strikes and counters, testing defenses and seeking advantage. To an untrained observer, the encounter would have appeared impossibly fast, almost choreographed in its deadly precision. Ryan watched from cover, his expression revealing stunned recognition of capabilities far beyond standard military training. The woman he had dismissed as a diversity hire was demonstrating combat proficiency that exceeded anything he had witnessed in his military career. The stalemate broke when Megan executed a high-risk maneuver, sacrificing defensive position for a potential finishing strike. Emily anticipated the tactic, countering with a technique taught only to Ghost Talon operatives, a combination of leverage points and applied pressure that exploited the human body's natural vulnerabilities. Megan found herself suddenly immobilized, Emily's precision hold rendering her temporarily helpless, despite her extensive training. Recognition flashed in her eyes, professional acknowledgement of superior technique. Impressive, she managed through controlled breathing. They said Ghost Talon's hand-to-hand program was exceptional, clearly not exaggerated. Emily maintained the hold with unwavering precision. Black Crescent, who's your handler? Megan laughed despite her compromised position. You know better than to ask that. Professional courtesy, remember? Before Emily could press further, the tactical situation changed dramatically. Headlights appeared on the fire road approaching the clearing, a vehicle moving at high speed toward their position. My extraction team, Megan stated with renewed confidence. Seems our private dance is about to gain an audience. Emily made a split-second tactical assessment. Maintaining custody of Megan while engaging multiple new threats would be problematic, especially with Ryan's safety to consider. She caught Shepard's eye across the clearing, receiving his silent confirmation of the changing parameters. Ryan, she called out, maintaining her hold on Megan. Move to the tree line north of our position. Now. To his credit, Ryan responded to the command tone without question, abandoning his cover behind the SUV and sprinting toward the indicated position. As he moved, Shepard emerged from concealment, covering his transit with Megan's recovered weapon. The approaching vehicle rounded the final bend, its headlights illuminating the clearing fully. A black tactical van with reinforced bumpers and tinted windows, standard configuration for specialized extraction teams. Emily made her decision. With precise application of pressure, she rendered Megan temporarily unconscious, using a ghost talon technique designed to create a short recovery window. Lowering the incapacitated operative to the ground, she immediately moved to join Ryan and Shepard at the tree line. 3 minutes until she regains consciousness, she informed them as they took cover. Extraction vehicle contains unknown number of hostiles. Assessment. Shepard checked the recovered weapons magazine, 3 rounds remaining. Tactical disadvantage. Priority is securing Wilson and the intelligence he represents. Ryan stared at them both, his military training warring with the confusion. What the hell is going on? Who are you people really? Later, Emily replied tersely, her attention focused on the tactical situation as the van skidded to a halt in the clearing. Right now we need to move. That extraction team won't be interested in taking prisoners. The van's side door slid open, disgorging 4 black-clad figures with tactical gear and automatic weapons. They moved with the coordinated precision of a well-trained unit, immediately securing Megan's unconscious form while establishing perimeter security. 9 o'clock drainage ravine 200 meters, Shepard directed quietly. Move on my signal. Ryan hesitated, military discipline temporarily overcome by the night's revelations. Why should I trust either of you? For all I know, you're both part of whatever this is. Emily met his gaze directly. If I were with them, you'd already be dead or captured. Megan was seconds from killing you when I intervened. Those are facts, not assertions. Now you can come with us and survive, or stay here and face an extraction team that has already demonstrated lethal intent. The stark assessment penetrated Ryan's confusion. He nodded once, accepting the immediate tactical reality despite his unanswered questions. Shepard gave the signal, and they moved as 1-3 figures, slipping into deeper shadows as the extraction team began a methodical sweep of the area. Behind them, Megan was being loaded into the vehicle, still unconscious, but already showing signs of recovery. They reached the drainage ravine without incident, using its natural depression as cover, while they put distance between themselves and the clearing. Ryan followed their lead, his movements revealing the solid tactical training that underlay his privileged attitude. They'll track us, he noted as they paused to assess their position. Standard procedure for a professional extraction team is to secure the primary target and eliminate potential witnesses. Correct, Shepard confirmed, impressed, despite himself, by the young man's accurate assessment, which is why we're not heading back to the base. We're not? Ryan looked between them with renewed suspicion. Too obvious, Emily explained. They'll have the direct routes covered, expecting us to seek the security of Fort Harrison. We need to circle wide, approach from an unexpected direction. Shepard checked his watch. Base security will have deployed search teams by now. General Wilson would have initiated full tactical response once we failed to report in. Emily nodded, which gives us a potential advantage if we can reach the communications array on the western ridge. Emergency channel can alert security to our position without broadcasting our presence to the extraction team. Ryan processed this with growing comprehension. The maintenance shack on Tower Ridge has an emergency radio, 3 miles west of our current position. Good, Shepard acknowledged. You know this terrain. Lead the way. The subtle transfer of limited authority seemed to steady Ryan, giving him purpose amid the chaos of the night's events. He oriented himself quickly, then set off in the indicated direction, moving with the confident efficiency of someone on familiar ground. As they traveled and Emily maintained rear security, her senses attuned to any indication of pursuit. The extraction team would be professional, thorough, and determined, a combination that made them extremely dangerous. They had covered approximately a mile when Ryan finally broke the tense silence. "You're not really a lieutenant, are you?" he asked Emily, keeping his voice low despite the isolation of their position. "No," she confirmed simply. "And you, Paul," he addressed Shepard, "you're not really retired." Shepard's weathered face revealed nothing. Retirement is a relative concept in our line of work. Ryan absorbed this, connecting pieces of a puzzle that had been before him all along. Ghost Talon. I thought that was just a military urban legend. Special operators who didn't officially exist conducting missions that never happened. Urban legends often have foundations in reality, Emily replied. And Megan Collins, whatever her name is, she's what exactly? Black Crescent operative, Shepard supplied. Part of a well-funded non-state actor with connections to various hostile intelligence services. They specialize in acquisition and sale of classified military technology. Ryan's expression darkened with realization. The Black Talon missile defense system. That's what this is about, my father's pet project. Your father's very classified pet project, Emily corrected, which somehow became known to unauthorized parties. The implication hung in the air between them. Ryan stopped walking, turning to face them fully. "You think I leaked classified information," he stated flatly. "That I betrayed my country, my oath, my father." "Did you?" Shepard asked the question, direct, but not accusatory. Ryan's face flushed with genuine anger. "Absolutely not. Everything I told Megan was unclassified, base procedures, training schedules, personnel rotations. Nothing about Black Talon or any other classified project." Emily studied him carefully, years of operational experience, allowing her to assess truth with reasonable accuracy. "Knowingly," she amended, "but she may have extracted information through indirect questioning. Comments about your father's schedule, his security protocols, his meetings." The possibility hit Ryan visibly, memory reassessing past conversations through a new lens of understanding. "She asked questions about my father's routine, his security detail, his access procedures. I thought she was just interested in my family background." "She was building a profile," Shepard explained, "intelligence gathering through social engineering. Standard methodology." Ryan's military training reasserted itself as he processed this information. "So I was compromised, used as an unwitting intelligence source." His expression hardened with professional determination. "What's our next move?" The question represented a significant shift from suspicious subject to potential ally. Emily exchanged a quick glance with Shepard, receiving his subtle confirmation. "Reach the communications array," she replied. "Alert base security to the extraction team's presence. Secure your father's safety and the integrity of the Black Talon project." Ryan nodded, accepting the mission parameters. "Then we better move. The extraction team will have picked up our trail by now." As if summoned by his assessment, a distant sound carried through the forest, the methodical movement of trained personnel in pursuit. Emily estimated at least 3 operators moving in standard search pattern, approximately half a mile behind their position. "Tactical suggestion," she offered as they resumed their journey with increased urgency. "The stream crossing ahead. We can use it to mask our trail temporarily by some distance." Ryan nodded agreement, leading them toward the water feature with renewed purpose. As they traveled, Emily noted a subtle change in his demeanor, respect replacing the dismissive attitude he had shown throughout training. Whatever his faults, Ryan Wilson was adapting to the reality of their situation with professional resilience. The stream provided temporary concealment, as anticipated, allowing them to proceed another mile without signs of immediate pursuit. The terrain grew steadily more challenging, rising toward the ridge that housed the communications array. Dense forest gave way to rocky outcroppings, the ground becoming steeper and less forgiving. As they ascended, Emily maintained vigilant awareness of their surroundings. The pursuit had gone silent, not abandoned, but shifted to a more careful approach. Professional operators conserving energy and minimizing sound, confident in their quarry's limited options. They reached a particularly exposed section of trail where a rock slide had cleared the natural cover, creating a 50-yard stretch of open ground. Shepard held up his hand, signaling a halt. "Problematic," he assessed quietly. "No cover, clear fields of fire from multiple vantage points. Potential ambush location." Ryan studied the terrain with tactical consideration. "Alternative route adds at least 30 minutes to our journey. Ridge's trail loops around to the north, mostly under forest and cover. Emily scanned the exposed area, identifying potential threat positions with practiced efficiency. They're not ahead of us yet, but moving parallel to our position. If we delay, they'll establish containment and cut off our approach to the communications array. Shepard made the tactical decision. We cross. I'll take point, create distraction if necessary. Wilson center position, Emily rear security. The use of her first name wasn't accidental, a subtle signal that professional distance had given way to operational intimacy. Whatever happened next, they would face it as a cohesive unit rather than suspicious allies of convenience. They moved across the exposed ground with controlled urgency, each step calculated, each movement purposeful. Halfway across, Emily's instincts flared. The night had gone too quiet, the ambient sounds of wilderness suddenly absent. Contact imminent, she warned softly. 3 o'clock elevated position. Shepard adjusted his course slightly, angling toward better defensive positioning at the far edge of the open ground. Ryan matched the adjustment without question, his movements revealing solid tactical training beneath the privileged exterior he had presented during the training program. They had nearly reached the relative safety of the tree line when the first shot came, a precision round that struck the ground inches from Ryan's foot. A warning rather than an attempt to kill. Professional courtesy of a sort, or perhaps an indication that Ryan was still considered a valuable asset rather than a disposable witness. Cover, Shepard commanded, though all three were already moving in response to the shot. They reached the minimal protection of the forest edge as a voice called out from the darkness, amplified by tactical equipment. "Lieutenant Wilson," the voice announced, calm and professional. "Your presence is requested by our employer. Cooperate, and your companions may leave unharmed. Resist, and outcomes become considerably less favorable for all parties." Ryan looked to Shepard and Emily, a silent question in his expression. Shepard shook his head, once a clear indication that the offer was tactical deception rather than genuine negotiation. "What's the play?" Ryan asked quietly, his earlier suspicion replaced by recognition of their operational expertise. Emily assessed their position rapidly. "They're attempting to isolate you, separate you from our protection. Standard extraction methodology when dealing with a high-value intelligence asset." "I'm not an asset," Ryan stated firmly, "and I'm certainly not going with them voluntarily." "Good decision," Shepard approved. "Now we need to create distance reach, the communications array, before they can establish a complete containment perimeter." Emily had been scanning their surroundings while they conferred, identifying potential avenues of approach and withdrawal. Ridge Trail splits 200 yards ahead. Eastern Fork leads directly to the array, but will be covered. Western Fork circles behind longer route, but less obvious. "They'll expect us to take the direct approach," Ryan noted. "Time pressure working against careful tactics." Shepard nodded approvingly at the assessment. "So we give them what they expect to see, then do the opposite." The tactical deception was executed with precision. Using natural materials to create the impression of three figures moving rapidly up the Eastern Fork, they actually proceeded along the western route, a longer but less obvious approach to their objective. The communications array appeared through the trees as they completed their circuitous journey, a cluster of antennae and satellite dishes surrounding a small maintenance building. No exterior lights illuminated the facility, but the electronic equipment emitted enough ambient glow to guide their approach. "No visible security," Emily noted as they conducted final reconnaissance from the forest edge, "but assume the extraction team has positioned at least one operator to cover this location." Ryan studied the layout with professional attention. Standard protocol would place observation on the southeastern approach, clear fields of fire covering the main access path. "Agreed," Shepard confirmed. "We'll approach from the northwestern blind spot, use the satellite dish cluster as cover for the final approach." They moved according to plan, utilizing natural concealment and maintaining noise discipline as they worked their way toward the maintenance building. No shots or challenges interrupted their progress. Either they had successfully evaded observation, or the extraction team was allowing them to reach the facility before making their move. The maintenance building door featured a standard key code lock. Ryan entered a sequence without hesitation, the panel flashing green as the mechanism disengaged. "Emergency access code," he explained as they slipped inside. "All base officers are required to memorize it." The interior contained basic communications equipment, a backup system designed for emergency use, when primary systems failed. Ryan moved to the console with practiced familiarity, powering up the essential components while minimizing unnecessary systems that might betray their presence. Emergency channel requires authentication, he explained, hands moving across the control panel. My code should still work unless they've already locked me out of the system. Emily secured the door while Shepard took position at the single window, maintaining visual coverage of their most likely approach vectors. The tension in the small space was palpable. Three individuals acutely aware that their actions in the next few minutes could determine not only their survival, but potentially the security of classified military technology. Ryan activated the emergency channel, entered his authentication code, and waited with visible tension as the system processed his credentials. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the console illuminated with green confirmation. Fort Harrison Emergency Communications Lieutenant Wilson transmitting, he stated clearly into the microphone. Authentication code Sierra Echo Victor Echo, November. Requesting immediate tactical response to communications array sector. Hostile forces in pursuit, classified information at risk. Repeat, immediate tactical response required. The response came almost instantly, the voice unmistakably that of General Wilson. Authentication confirmed. Tactical teams already deployed to your last known position. SITREP Lieutenant. Ryan glanced at Emily and Shepard, receiving their silent confirmation to proceed. 3 personnel at Communications Array Maintenance Building. Self plus, he hesitated briefly, then continued with military precision. Plus 2 friendly operators. Pursued by hostile extraction team, minimum 4 operatives with tactical gear and automatic weapons. Believed to be connected to Black Crescent organization attempting to compromise Black Talon security protocols. A brief silence followed this transmission, then General Wilson's voice returned with crisp authority. Understood. Maintain position. Tactical response ETA 4 minutes. Authentication challenge, Crimson Sky. Authentication response, Midnight Horizon. Ryan replied without hesitation. Confirmed. Wilson out. As the transmission ended, Emily moved away from the door, her posture shifting subtly to heightened alert. They're here, she stated quietly. Extraction team moving into position around the building. Shepard nodded, having detected the same subtle indicators of professional operators establishing a containment perimeter. 4 minutes is a long time in tactical engagement. Ryan checked the ammunition and Megan's recovered weapons, still only 3 rounds. Not exactly favorable odds. We've faced worse, Emily replied, her calm confidence a product of years operating in precisely such situations. Defensive positioning, maximum use of available cover, controlled response to any breach attempt. They arranged themselves accordingly, using the limited furniture and equipment within the small building to create defensive positions covering all potential entry points. The silence outside stretched taut with expectation, professional operators assessing the situation before committing to action. The standoff broke with unexpected suddenness. Rather than a direct assault, a voice called out from the darkness surrounding the building. Building occupants, be advised that your position is completely surrounded. We have no particular interest in causing casualties, but will respond with appropriate force to any resistance. Lieutenant Wilson is requested to exit the building alone. All others will remain inside until our business is concluded. Emily caught Shepard's eye across the room, a silent tactical assessment passing between them. The extraction team was attempting to isolate Ryan, again standard procedure, when a high-value intelligence asset was the primary objective. Not happening, Ryan called back, his voice steady despite the pressure. Tactical response teams are already inbound. Your best option is immediate withdrawal. A brief silence followed this declaration, then a new sound became audible in the distance, the distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors approaching rapidly. Fort Harrison's tactical response arriving ahead of schedule. The extraction team leader's voice came again, tension now evident beneath a professional demeanor. Final opportunity, Lieutenant Wilson. Exit now or we breach with maximum force. Emily moved to Ryan's position, speaking quietly but with absolute conviction. When they breach, stay down. Let us handle the tactical response. Ryan met her gaze with newfound respect. These aren't amateurs. 4 operators with tactical gear against the 3 of us with a single weapon. Numerical and equipment advantage, Emily acknowledged calmly, but they haven't faced Ghost Talon operatives before. The helicopter sound grew louder now, clearly identifiable as multiple aircraft approaching from the direction of Fort Harrison. The extraction team's window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Their decision came in the form of synchronized flashbang grenades thrown against each entry point, standard breach procedure for professional tactical teams. The devices detonated with calculated precision designed to disorient and incapacitate anyone inside the structure. What followed demonstrated why Ghost Talon operatives were considered almost mythical within military circles. Despite the disorienting effects of the breach devices, Emily and Shepard responded with choreographed precision, positioning themselves to intercept the entry team with maximum efficiency. The first operator through the door encountered Emily, his tactical advantage negated by her specialized training in close-quarters combat. Before he could bring his weapon to bear, she had neutralized both his offensive capability and his consciousness. The engagement concluded in less than 3 seconds. Shepard handled the window breach with similar efficiency, decades of operational experience translating into economical violence, applied with surgical precision. The second operator dropped without firing a single round his specialized equipment, providing no advantage against a living legend of covert operations. Ryan, following Emily's instruction, maintained cover during the initial breach. As the third operator entered through the rear access point, however, training overcame caution. He emerged from position with Megan's recovered weapon, firing 2 of their precious 3 rounds with unexpected accuracy. The operator staggered backward, his body armor absorbing the kinetic impact, but the surprise disrupting his tactical focus long enough for Emily to complete the neutralization. The fourth and final team member, recognizing the rapidly deteriorating tactical situation, attempted strategic withdrawal rather than completing the planned breach. Shepard anticipated the move, intercepting him outside the structure with devastating efficiency. In less than 20 seconds, the entire extraction team had been neutralized without a single fatality, a testament to the extraordinary capabilities of Ghost Talon's training methodology. Emily secured the incapacitated operators with their own restraint equipment, while Shepard confirmed the perimeter was clear of additional threats. The helicopters appeared overhead, powerful searchlights illuminating the area around the communications array. Fort Harrison tactical teams fast roped into position establishing a security perimeter with professional precision. Ryan stood in the doorway of the maintenance building, watching the military operation unfold with newfound perspective. The privileged arrogance that had defined his early interactions with Emily had been replaced by something approaching genuine respect. "You could have done that at any time during training," he observed as Emily joined him. "All those times I thought I had the upper hand." "The mission required maintaining cover," she replied simply. "Your ego wasn't a priority concern." A ghost of a smile touched his features, self-awareness rather than offense. "Fair assessment." The tactical team leader approached their position, recognizing Ryan immediately. "Lieutenant Wilson, your father requests your immediate presence at command. Secure transport is standing by." Ryan nodded acknowledgement, then turned back to Emily and Shepard. "I still have questions. A lot of them." "Some will be answered," Shepard replied. "Others can't be. Nature of the work." "Your father's waiting," Emily reminded him. "He'll want confirmation of your safety and information about tonight's events." Ryan studied her for a moment longer, as if attempting to reconcile the unremarkable lieutenant from training with the extraordinary operative he'd witnessed in action. "Thank you," he said finally, "for saving my life. Multiple times, apparently." Emily nodded once, accepting the gratitude without unnecessary elaboration. As Ryan departed with his security escort, she turned to Shepard, their mission now entering its final phase. "General Wilson will want a full debriefing," she noted. "How much are we authorized to disclose?" Shepard watched the tactical team securing the incapacitated extraction team members, his expression unreadable. "Enough to ensure the Black Talon project's security. Nothing about Ghost Talon's continued operations or your specific role." "And Megan, the primary Black Crescent operative, is still missing." "Her extraction team failed," Shepard observed. "Standard protocol would be immediate withdrawal to secondary exfiltration point. She's likely already beyond our immediate reach." Emily accepted this assessment with professional detachment. Operational realities often precluded perfect outcomes. The primary mission objectives had been achieved, the security breach identified, the immediate threat neutralized, and Ryan Wilson's unwitting role as an intelligence source terminated. As they walked toward the waiting helicopter, Shepard placed a hand briefly on Emily's shoulder, a rare gesture of personal connection from a man who maintained rigid professional boundaries. "Good work," he said simply. "Mission accomplished." Emily nodded, accepting the compliment with the same quiet competence that defined her operational methodology. The ghost had emerged from the shadows when necessary, performed her duty with extraordinary skill, and would soon return to the darkness where such operatives function best. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them back toward Fort Harrison and the inevitable bureaucratic aftermath of their operation. Below them, the Virginia wilderness receded into darkness, concealing both the evening's events and the continued existence of a unit that officially had never existed. Ghost Talon would continue its silent watch, its operatives moving through the world unrecognized, except by those with the experience to see beyond appearances. And Emily Winters, or whatever name she would use for her next assignment, would return to the shadows a silent guardian against threats most would never know existed. The most dangerous person in any room, as always, was the one no one bothered to notice until it was too late.